and the Constitution got written, the concept that you would have a company, a private company, as powerful, as important as Facebook or Twitter or AWS that supports those platforms. What they couldn't conceive of, and so I think it's gonna pose a lot of those questions, as opposed to maybe stock questions. But we'll see how it all plays out.
But
I
Ken,
Yeah,
Ken,
go ahead.
don't you think that because Elon Musk is a disruptor, it doesn't really matter how it all plays out? I think it'll play out that he won't be allowed to buy it for one reason or another, but that will take years to really happen. By that time, all the changes will have taken place. He will have gone in there and forced all the changes that he wants to happen, to happen. People have already left Twitter thinking that even if he was a 9% shareholder, it would create changes and they didn't want to work for him. And I believe that he's in there to shake things up and that how it turns out is of less interest to him than actually having the ability to shake things up and give the company a vision going forward. And if that vision is free speech, then it's free speech because that's something that's important to
He's
him.
going to have to
If
buy the company, Francine, for him to do this at this point. He's got now a hostile takeover, so the board is probably not thrilled with him. So they're probably not going to be listening to him unless they have to. And now the only way they're going to have to is if he buys the company. So if he just sticks with his 9%, I don't think he's going to be able to do very much at this point outside without a board seat. Okay, so
No,
it's
I think he's going to try to buy the company, and in trying to buy it, more people will leave who oppose him, and more things will happen that favor him. And even though it may take 10 years and two
Oh yeah,
lawsuits,
10 years, absolutely. Yeah, 10. You're right,
you
10
know,
years. Yeah, but in the interim, if should he try to buy the company, I expect just because they already have issues with him, the SEC will probably try to enjoin him from buying the company because of the way he accumulated the stock. He made his filings. I mean, it's going to be years of litigation. I don't expect he even wants to get involved with that litigation. So I mean, I just think this is him having fun. I mean, at this
Ken,
point.
Ken, just a quick question. Um, to your knowledge, is there any other precedence of something like this, like a publicly traded company is being taken over 100% by somebody else?
Sure.
Can any example come close to it?
Well, is he talking about a single individual or just talking about companies going private? Because
Well,
companies
similar
go.
sort of situation. I mean, there could be like, I mean, obviously you need billions of dollars to actually do that. So,
Well, yes,
but
smaller situations. Yeah, I mean, I've seen founders try to buy companies. The guy who owns Bally's Casinos is now trying to take it private by himself. Okay, so I mean, yeah, this happens. Twitter's a quite a large company. But I mean, the companies being taken private. Yeah, I've seen that happen many times. Usually they're smaller. Okay, not this size, but yes, it happens. It happens.
So, Ken,
Um, yeah,
quick question on that. So, say he had a partnership with, say, somebody like Peter Thiel. It was old buddy from PayPal. Would he have to disclose that right now?
yeah. So there's a technical legal thing that if you're acting in concert with others, let's say for example, and gets highly technical, but this is your question. Let's say you were even under a 5% holder, but you were working in concert with a bunch of 4% holders. You would be considered a control group, and you would actually have to technically file that you've got 4%, this one's got 3%, this one's got 2.5, and you're trying to effectuate this change or take control or whatever. Yes, you would actually have to file as a control group. So there is a legal requirement. Now, I'm not telling you that big holders sometimes don't do that and they're still having conversations. But that the technical legal requirement is if he was working in concert to do that. Yeah, they would have to disclose that. And given the high profile nature of that, I don't think that's probably happening. But that's my own.
Ken, didn't Michael Dell take his company private again?
He might. You think? I think you're right. I was
Yeah.
saying it's been done before. It's been done before. Yeah.
Well, Carl Icahn does this all the time, right, Ken? I mean, he, he goes in and he basically bullies the board and threatens, and then this is, poison pills and all things that change
Yeah,
in a company.
but
And
he usually doesn't buy the company. I think the
that's right.
question
He
was
does it just to get the profit on the stock, right?
right. It's
To
called
raise the price of the stock.
back in the '80s. It was called greenmail. Basically,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
Elon hasn't shown to do greenmail, so But yeah, but I think the question was, can one person just take a company private? And the answer is yes. Sometimes the family, Cox Communications, which is my local cable company, which some of you also might have, depending where you live in the country. They had gone public. I actually helped do their convertible offering when I was on the institutional side. When they were a public company, and they later went private. A lot of cable companies have gone private. So in Cox's situation, it isn't a single individual; it's a family. There were two sisters who basically controlled it. I'm not even sure if they're still alive, but the Cox family took back private. Happens over time. Then there are companies that are private that have never been public. Because I was just in another room where everyone's a couple of people are rallying against who owns what, whatever. Cargill is one of the it's a large food processing company. They're the 15th. They would be the 15th largest company in America, bigger than AT&T if they were a public company. But they're completely privately owned. And they've never been public. So there are large private companies. You know.
Yeah. As far as getting back to Twitter, I mean, Twitter, I don't know how many people here go on Twitter or spend time on Twitter. I personally don't. I used to. It's a play. I don't know. It's an awful place, right? It's a place where probably 50% of the people. I personally during the last election, I lost like 35% of my followers overnight. They just wiped it out because they must have flagged me as somebody who was right leaning. But yeah, nobody comes out of Twitter feeling good. So as far as this disruption and what shakes out of it, if employees are so distraught that Elon Musk has anything to do with their company, they should bail. I mean, it's a poisonous place that just doesn't. It's not for it's 50% of America right now probably is on Twitter because they like what they see. The other 50% are just getting attacked or dropped. So I say just let it all shake out. I think it's overall it could be very good for Twitter.
Oh, I think that's what he's trying to fix,
Yep.
because it's it's the lack of free speech. It's the presumption of censorship under the aegis of safe space. And I believe in safe space. I don't believe in, obviously, in people stalking and harassing women, but there's got to be another way to fix that besides throwing out people who you don't agree with. That's a pretty extreme fix.
Correct. And teaming with mainstream media and the stuff that they did during the last election and censorship and as much as everybody 50% of America didn't like the last president, they basically banned a president of the United States from using their platform because of things that they could somehow justify and say, hey, we're a platform, we have nothing to do with what's being posted here, but however we're going to deem this person or these people, right, overall not worthy of being on this platform. So it's to me, it's just kind of a mess.
Welcome
John,
back,
I don't want to get
Tara.
Well,
into
it all boils down to Section 230, and no one has been able to fix Section 230 to to um, to the right degree. They always fix it the wrong way.
Yep,
Tara, you
because of the
there?
lobbyists and all the money behind it.
Thank you, everybody. Tara, you
And
there?
I'm
I
back.
I, I should.
Okay,
I,
welcome back.
Hey, thanks. What's up, Ken?
Yeah, I was just going to point out on 230. I mean, I mentioned this before, and it's going to take a while to get through the courts. But Trump a while ago filed a really interesting lawsuit on 230. basically implying the existence of 230 creates a situation because of their immunity that these big platforms like Twitter, okay, have become an arm of the government because the government's given them legal immunity, and therefore they should be held to the same standard on First Amendment infringements as if they were the government. It's an incredibly interesting lawsuit, and it will take a while for it to play out. I don't even think it's gone to a district court for it hasn't even gone at that level where it's been decided. But it's a very interesting lawsuit from a from that perspective. With a 230 has created a situation where certain things like Facebook and Twitter are in fact now an arm of the government because of the government immunity, that they're in fact a government actor and they should be held, to the same standards as if the government was going to restrict your First Amendment rights. Very interesting suit.
But at the same time, that Section 230 is actually being used by the social media to be free of from liability for what others are saying. So if we actually take that, a lot of people would be suing a lot of people, including Donald Trump himself, when he is saying many things. So I think it is, everybody is looking at it
No, they
how it
wouldn't be
would
suing
benefit.
certain people, Messi. They would be suing the platform. They'd be suing the.
Exactly.
And
Indirectly, yes. Indirectly, yes. I agree with you. But I think that would open a huge can of worms, because I think then how are they going to police a lot of people saying about a lot of people dangerous things, and then somebody, and basically it would make the platform not really feasible to me anyway.
But they're doing that, Messi, with putting things in, saying like, you know, whatever comments on election fraud, comments on Hunter Biden's laptop, and putting things in and notes into Twitter, into Facebook, all this stuff that had an agenda that was not truthful. Right, years later, and coming out saying, okay, that's right. Well, by the way, X percentage of the voters would have voted the other way had they known, had they had the ability to read this on Twitter or read this on Facebook, but they had no knowledge of it because it was being censored by these
John,
platforms.
stop cherry
You know,
picking, John.
I just
I,
want to say this is Irvin. I'm down here at the bottom. Um, I'm sorry that some of us in our political views may have been not heard, but Twitter, Facebook, and I'm not a big fan of either. These are all companies. They have a right, and it's in there when you go through and read the things that you've agreed to, and the fact that all of a sudden you feel like you're being um, discriminated against because you didn't have the right to say a certain thing. They do have certain rules that we have to abide by, whether you read them or not. And when it comes up and you don't like it, then you say they should be part of the government. This is something. When these companies first got started, there was a big thing of whether or not at some point were they publishing companies or something else. And this issue has been going on since these companies came into being.
That's
Legislation has
right,
not.
Irvin.
I'll finish up in a second here. Legislation has not said one way or the other. So I'm really sorry that we, as Republicans, Independents, Democrats, feel that we aren't being heard. There are other means to getting that out there. I'm really sorry, but it amazes me.
But
Irvin,
Irvin, this is
you're
John. Good
absolute.
morning. But you got to admit that it's changing, right? Twitter never did what they've recently done. Facebook has never done that. They didn't have these comments and these tags and all this stuff that they've done of the past couple years in their history, and they've been around. I
John,
mean, Facebook's like 20 years.
John,
Yeah,
I
who
just
wants to
want to say,
comment on me cherry picking? I heard it earlier.
I don't mean to talk over you, but
Well, you mentioned Hunter Biden's laptop, but you didn't mention the 45th president of the United States,
who really should be in jail for insurrection. I'm done.
There you go. Okay.
And the
And
other
That
dimension to
works good.
this,
That's
the,
that's a good factual point, Dr. Fran. The
the other
laptop was not factual, right? The laptop that was Russian propaganda, right? All that stuff was not factual, except the New York Post
The
thing.
laptop sat in a repair shop. Who knows what was done to it? And you
Yeah, it
know.
was abandoned by a crackhead.
Do we really want to
You
get
know,
Let,
into?
John,
Do we
I
John,
really
don't. I
so
don't
can
want
want
I
to
to get
debate
can
into
this
this? I
anymore
so
don't
because
think
it's
so.
let's
we
talk
don't
tech. All
need to
right.
just base somebody's character because of something. That is a personal issue between him and his family and himself. And for someone to get on this platform and say that, I wouldn't say that about you or anyone else. It's not our right to debate someone. What problems he has, that's his problem. Whether or not whatever was on that laptop, whether it was true, false, or indifferent, we can go down the list of how many siblings and children of past presidents have abused the power, and the man in office not always knowing. So this is not an issue that's new. So I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that we levelly look at what's going on. The reason some people got banned on Twitter is because they were giving misinformation. There's a difference from fact-based stuff and misinformation.
But at what point were these platforms put under the guidelines of they have to provide proper information? This is not like a media outlet. This is not. This is just a place where people go and post things, and you follow the people you want to follow, and you can unfollow the people you don't want to follow. And who is to say, that what should be written at the top of everyone's Facebook or Twitter is that the information you read here is probably not factual. And that's it. And let everyone post whatever it is they want to post because they're going to follow whatever they want to follow anyway. And I think it's the point that John is making, regardless of which side you're on, is that information is being suppressed specifically because of political parties or because of the way they want things to swing. And that in and of itself is more scary because what makes that different than what Russia is doing or what China is doing?
Yeah,
but
and I
that
feel
but
the
that's
same way. And I'm on the left. Let me start by saying that I'm on the left, but I still feel that way. Um, we never used to suppress information under 230 because 230 in 230, as I understand it, if the content is user generated, the platform has no responsibility for it. And the reason for that, when the social media outlets first started, was because it's almost impossible to control user generated content at scale. And that is what these platforms are finding out now when they attempt to do it. But it's my personal view from the left. I'm woke, but I still believe in free speech. And I believe that these platforms, there's no way to moderate content at scale. And that if people understood how to use these platforms correctly, they would never see the stuff that they didn't want to see because I don't see it. I've got my Twitter feed tuned to the point where I see what I want to see. I see a whole bunch of tech stuff, and I see a whole bunch right now of Web3 stuff, and a whole bunch of healthcare stuff. And
And
that's
fat
all.
stuff.
But see, but
Yeah.
Dr. Francine, you're not the norm, right? You're savvy enough to filter what you want and what you don't want. That is, you're not the norm of the general population. Unfortunately, you're probably 50,000 times smarter than those that usually use Twitter. So, I mean, yes, 230 is there, but guess what? People try to crop up lawsuits regardless of 230, right? So, what are these companies trying to do? They're trying to protect themselves by saying, hey, information that information, if it's not factual, it's opinion, and opinions cause all sorts of, you know, things. Let's just say it like that. But so you have to remember those speaking, Dr. Francine, you're not the norm. That's not who. That's not. Twitter's general audience.
Okay.
The other side of
So
this is that we're in an age where disinformation is not just something that random people on the internet do. These are highly organized, highly optimized campaigns by state actors. And if we do not have a way, and it really is, at least the way things are, up to the platforms to do something about it, and therefore, uh, they or somebody else needs to be able to do something about it. And unfortunately, the only other somebody else would be the government, right? Which would be even more problematic. Um, if we want to say, if we wanted to be free speech absolutists, then we would have to say yes, and we think that is so critical that we are willing to let other state actors organize disinformation campaigns to spread pandemic disinformation or to undermine support for our government's opposition to their invasion of another country, when it's not just citizens of this country arguing against that, right? These are two different things. So, there are no easy solutions for the problem of organized disinformation, but information warfare is a real thing right now, and we can't ignore it, even when it is up against something as fundamental. And I am, very much in favor of free speech, but in many situations we are in the fire yelling fire in a crowded theater category, or similarly in a situation where like our very democracy could be undermined by other state actors exploiting our free speech.
Hmm.
But that's
Hey,
so
exactly what
there's
is
a
happening. That's
can I,
exactly what is happening. You are getting undermined by not allowing everyone the same platform to speak and having everyone decide what it is that they want for themselves. That's what I mean. I think I know we're leaning toward America, talking about America and all of this, but that's underlying like what free speech is supposed to be. What you're supposed to be educated enough to make a decision that you want for yourself with the information that you gather for yourself. If the information is being funneled to you, then what is it that you're really deciding? You're not getting everything. And again, it does for me. It doesn't matter to me which way you lean. This is just an overall view, like what Dr. Francine says. This is if you're being information is being suppressed, then who else's information is being suppressed and what is being suppressed, what's being put out there. You don't know. And that's kind of where the problem lies.
pardon? And
I
then, are,
think,
hold on. Is that Nicholas that was going to jump in?
yeah,
Or
you go ahead.
Nicholas? Okay, 1 second. Um, and by the way, good to see you back, Ellie. Great to hear your voice.
Finally up at the right time of day.
Good
Good morning.
morning. So, and who was it that was just speaking? Annette? Who was that?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Yeah,
Annette.
that
that,
was
It
that's
sounds
me.
like
Annette.
you're on a. It sounds like you're on a car phone, just like a narrow bandwidth of audio, like you're missing the high end and low end. Anyway, we can hear you. It just sounds like you're on a Fisher Price.
I am. I'm driving. I
Okay,
refuse to take the New York City Transit any longer.
okay,
So,
okay,
yes.
okay. All right, that's a whole other room we'll get into. So a couple of things that I've not heard anybody talk about. First is I'll take half a point on the soft prediction that Elon was going to do a takeover bid. Right? You remember that when a couple
Yes.
days ago, and here it is. And I want to walk people through what happens, what's likely to happen next, and then there's a bunch of interesting points I'm not hearing anybody talk about, and I think they are super interesting points. So, in no particular order, what's likely to happen? First of all, note that he offered 54.20 as the price, which, if you know anything about Elon, he loves dropping the 420 and 69 jokes at any opportunity. And he's done even in stock prices. He said he was going to buy back a whole bunch of Tesla and make Tesla private again. Going back to the conversation earlier about people, Michael Dell bringing his company, right? And he we don't know if he joked. He got himself in some hot shit with the SEC over tweeting that I've already got the funding set with the Saudis to take Tesla private again at some price ending in 420. You remember that?
Market abuse.
Right. So, and the SEC, made him do all kinds of interesting, kind of
He
risk
can't
slap.
serve as chairman of. He can't serve as
Yeah,
the chairman of a public company
Right,
anymore because of
right,
that, right?
right, right,
Yeah.
right. Now, notice my point is at that price for Tesla was also at something 420. This one is as well.
It was at 420, and he was going to go broke if he didn't raise the money, so he misled the market on purpose. The meme king has spoken.
Now, hang on, because here's a few interesting things here. I believe at this moment Twitter's, because of the big slide that tech stocks went down, and you've heard me say that social media companies right now are particularly at a really interesting point because, and you've heard me talk about why Twitter's at such a really interesting point. And I know Nicholas disagrees with me on this. Smart people can totally disagree on this. However, my perspective is that Twitter is standing at a point where it can do a whole leverage what it already has in really profoundly interesting ways with regard to enabling payments with identities, with just as a touch point, right? And we know this is happening, right? They're talking about adding wallets. I have one right now. You go to my Clubhouse bio, you'll see my Twitter when I'm verified on Twitter, and you can send me payments in 4 different ways. And they're likely to do a wallet in the very near future for every Twitter account and enable payments across every profile in all of Twitter. And simultaneously, in the next few weeks, launch and they've already soft launched it with beta testers, the ability to have your own little store in your Twitter profile, just below your bio, just above your first tweet. There will be a swiping carousel of content, of items, either physical or virtual, that you can sell. Well, how are they going to pay for it? Well, I'm glad you asked, because they're now simultaneously launching the wallet that you will have in your account, which will also enable blockchain wallets, which will almost certainly involve Bitcoin on Lightning, if you've been following the tea leaves closely. So that would enable the first use case of a massive international global use case of buying, trading products and services on a daily basis with identity. That's very interesting, especially to somebody who co-created PayPal, which was digital payments on the freaking internet. He would find this terribly interesting. That is the product pipeline. No doubt he was shown the product pipeline by the Twitter team before he made even the 10% purchase, whatever it was. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I think it's possible that he knew that he was not going to be allowed on the board from the beginning. It's very possible that he knew there's no way the current board or the employees are going to just let me jump on there. There's a possibility they're not going to let me on there. That probably didn't come as a huge shock to him that they walked back the offer of having him join the board. I don't think he was shocked. He didn't say he was shocked. I don't think he was. And this offer that he's making, I think is very possible they won't accept it. In fact, I'll bet that they don't accept it, partly for the reasons I just mentioned, because they have an unusually, at this moment in time, an unusually bright product roadmap ahead of them, as I just described, and revenue-rich product roadmap, not just features that are not monetizable, highly monetizable features, like shopping, social shopping on Twitter. That's wildly monetizable. So I think that's huge revenue potential. So I think because of that, they'll have to make a really strong case for why they're going to want to accept this, because they have an unusually bright, revenue-rich product pipeline ahead of them. So I think Elon knows that. I think Elon knows they're going to turn down his offer. Now, that gives him a unique opportunity. And we know that he knows this already, because he wrote in his SEC filing a email or a message to Brett Taylor, who's the current chairman of the board. And if you don't know Brett, you should. He's like Silicon Valley, very well known in the Valley, and he kind of recently came on as the chairman of the board. Yeah, it was just a few months ago when Jack was stepping out. So it says, he says to Brett, chairman of the board, I invested in Twitter as I believe in its potential to be a platform for free speech around the globe, and I believe free speech is a societal imperative for functioning democracy. However, since making my investment, I now realize the company will neither thrive nor serve this societal imperative in its current form. Twitter needs to be transformed as a private company. Okay, so when he made the investment, did he must have known at that time that they were never going to allow him on the board? Because now he's saying, I made the investment and I'm not allowed to join the board. Thus, I'm also now in a position I need to sell my shares. Oh, really? Well, did somebody promise you were going to join the board before you bought the shares? Because now you're saying you're selling the shares because you're not able to join the board. That's essentially what he's saying. He's saying, I'm not able to join the board, thus I need to sell
There's
my
a
shares. Now, hold on. He was
there's a
not
simpler
promised he was going
explanation.
to join the board when he made the purchase. So how is it possible that he's now saying, I'm not allowed to join the board. I might need to sell my shares now. Well, you weren't told you were going to join the board when you made the purchase. They couldn't have
Yeah, but
promised that.
Tyler, what does that do? It
Hold
makes
I
on.
the
think
stock drop
Hold
when
on. I'm
people buy
just
more.
warming up. Annette, hold on.
Sorry,
He
go.
then
Go.
says,
Yeah, sorry.
as a result, I'm offering to buy 100% of Twitter for 54.20, again with the 420 joke, wink wink, per share in cash, 54% premium over the day. I began investing in Twitter in a 38% premium over the day. My investment was publicly announced. My offer is my best and final offer. And if it is not accepted, I would need to reconsider my position as a shareholder. What that means is I'm going to sell all of my shares, which is 10% of the shares of the company, which would have a very downward pressure on the stock. In fact, the stock went up about 10% today already. Now, it's up about what, 30% from when he purchased, right? So he made already 30% on his initial investment. Now, he's now threatening to sell if his offer isn't accepted. Well, guess who's going to find out first that his offer isn't accepted? You or him? He's going to know long before you do that his offer is not accepted. And he will then be in a position to sell his shares before you do. Not only could he, and tell me what if I'm wrong on this, Nicholas and Ken, could he
yeah,
not then,
there's a few
hold on,
things that you're
could he not, if his offer is refused, short Twitter, knowing that the price of Twitter is going to drop potentially 20-30% if his offer is not accepted? At least 10%.
there's a few elements that you could
Waiting
add
for the
to your
ka-ching,
story
by the
here.
way.
Okay, so he says, now watch this. Twitter has extraordinary potential. I will unlock it. Okay, well, again, you weren't promised you were going to be on the board when you made the purchase. So why are you assuming that that your investment is only valid if you are on the board? Because that wasn't a guarantee when you made the investment. Now, there's a second part to his text where he says, as indicated this weekend, I believe the company should be private to go through the changes that need to be made. After the past several days of thinking this over, I've decided I want to acquire the company and take it private. I'm going to send you an offer letter tonight. Uh, Here we go. Best and final. I'm not playing the back and forth game. I have moved straight to the end. It's a high price. Your shareholders will love it. If the deal doesn't work, given that I don't have confidence in management, ouch. Oh, ouch. That's holy shit harsh to the Twitter management team. Yeah, to say I don't have confidence in the management, for those who've never been part of a startup management team, let me just unpack that for you. There's the board, and then you have the management team, which is like the CEO, the CMO, the CTO, they who run the company day to day. That's the management team. And Elon just said, I don't have confidence in the management team. That's fucking pretty harsh thing to say to the team who's currently running Twitter day to day. Although he's being candid, but what he's saying is if he does come in, he's going to gut the management team,
And
right?
the
So,
CTO and the publishing guy from Truth Finder are looking for jobs right now, aren't they?
hang on. Let me just finish the next couple sentences, and then I'm going to get into the really interesting points that I've not heard anybody mention. So he says, this is not a threat. It's simply not a good investment without the changes that need to be made. And those changes won't happen without taking the company private. Oh, really? So you invested last week knowing it was going to go private? No.
Exactly.
Now hold on, Messi. My advisors and my team are available if you have a letter. Okay, now watch. Here's the interesting points that I've not heard anybody raise that I think should be raised. Number one, Elon does a lot of business with China. You guys were all just talking about how influential Twitter as a platform and the free speech is, and how it can be manipulated in ways that impact American culture and specifically politics, etc. Right now, China feels the same way. Russia very much feels the same way. Russia just banned Twitter, by the way, because of what's going on in Ukraine, because they don't want people to see what's going on there. Now, could not a person who does tons of business with China, with Russia, wants to do $1 trillion of business with India, use Twitter, and wouldn't those countries, if he has a meeting with Putin, hey, I want to sell Teslas in Russia. Don't you think Putin, oh, well, you also own Twitter. Let's talk about Twitter for a second. Don't you think it's possible that Twitter would be introduced as a leverage point in what's called a 360 deal, like other points that revolve around the initial deal points? So, what are these other assets that you have that we could then tie into this equation? Wink, wink. Wouldn't it be nice if all of the things that, wouldn't you like a Twitter that functions very nicely with how you want it to run? You mean the article we read 24 hours ago about how TikTok is complying perfectly now with everything the Kremlin wants it to do? Do you not remember that headline from 24 hours ago? How did that happen? Could not Twitter do the same thing? Might Elon be okay with that? And wouldn't Putin value that tremendously, like to the tune of billions of dollars, such that he would roll out the royal red carpet for Tesla or SpaceX or anything else? Wouldn't China likely do the same? By the way, Chinese ambassadors and Chinese CCP members are using Twitter, even though the people of China can't. What if Elon guaranteed China, hey, we'll make a super CCP friendly version of Twitter for you in China? Can you imagine how much China would love that? The value that China would perceive in that, and some kind of 360 deal that might involve Tesla or SpaceX? So,
Tyler, he
yes,
can
hold
also.
on. I have like 5 other points that I'm surprised people are not bringing up. My point is, when you have somebody who has incredibly big other assets that could become uh, Twitter could be used as a form of leverage in dealing in the negotiations of those other assets. Is my point. So to Elon, Twitter is worth a lot more than it is to Messi, for example, because Elon has these other assets that he can leverage Twitter against. So another point that has not been mentioned, which is Jack Dorsey also potentially would like to see Twitter go private. We've had hints of that going back several months, that Jack has kind of, in a way, lost control of the company that he originally started. This happens quite frequently. He had this original vision. Things go off track due to financial reasons. Bands find themselves in these situations all the time with a label who's kind of has a little too much grip on the steering wheel and driving the band in ways they don't necessarily like going. And happens to companies as well, with founders in the company ends up going in some direction the founder didn't never anticipated. And now that's why he's kind of stepped down and he's focused on other things, because he doesn't want to commit his limited time on the planet to a project that is not going in the direction that he originally envisioned. So maybe, by the way, we've seen Jack Dorsey and Elon doing some really interesting synergy stuff just in the past few days. Is it possible that Jack is also secretly collaborating with Elon in this taking private? That could be very interesting. No, I don't hear anybody mentioning that. And
Tyler, somebody asked that question about coordination with somebody else. Maybe that was in another room. Somebody asked about coordinating
Hey,
with Peter Thiel. But let me point out that if they're doing that without disclosing, that's actually a violation of SEC rules. Because even if you're under 5%, if you're coordinating with other holders to where you are in aggregate over 5%, you're considered a control group, and you're supposed to report that. So that's I just leave that there.
There was already a lawsuit filed on that issue a couple of days ago.
remember, we made a
well,
comment on an article 2 months ago that, boy, I bet Jack wishes he had full control of Twitter to do whatever he wanted with in terms of he, what he wants to do with Bitcoin and how he's doing a partnership with Intel with their new mining chips. He wants to fully decentralize the mining of Bitcoin. He wants to use Lightning to he's a. And by the way, there was an article 24 hours ago saying that. Do you not remember this article? That 30 they interviewed 30 of Jack's closest professional friends, and they all said he doesn't really give a shit about Block or Square anymore. He's obsessed with the potential of Bitcoin for the democratization of finance for the world, right? Well, wouldn't he want to leverage his biggest asset, which would be Twitter? Well, unfortunately, he's not a major shareholder of relative to Elon and the other major shareholders like Vanguard and BlackRock or whatnot. So, wouldn't it be interesting if he could use Twitter in the way that he would like to? Well, guess who would probably share that vision with him? Probably Elon Musk, of all people. So that could be really an interesting. By the way, would we not imagine that if Elon did take it over, that he wouldn't reach out to Jack and be like, "Hey, Jack, anything that you wish you could have done when if you were had both hands on the wheel again?"
I
Just to
doubt
really
he'll do that.
well, they're collaborating on some interesting stuff in the back channels, so could happen. Anyway, is anyone else have a thought
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, can I, Tyler,
John, go ahead.
if I could build on what you said, because you're going right down a path that I wanted to bring up. And when we were talking last week about China renationalizing companies and the to and fro of the boundary between political governance and corporate governance at an international scale, I think hopefully this debate we're having today, which is amazing, will still be going on in 30 years. Because if it's not, all it will mean is that there's no true democracy or free speech remaining to have this debate. Because I think there's a structural tension between political governance that's geography based and corporate governance that is geography independent, precisely as you characterized in your argument. And that's not going away. And what we haven't addressed in this discussion is how natural monopolies that were inconceivable before the internet, that these natural monopolies that are being built and that are evolving and will evolve for a long time, hopefully, are encroaching upon the historical role of political governance. And I just, it's very hard for me to imagine a solution that reconciles this boundary conflict, this jurisdiction conflict between public companies, private companies that are natural monopolies, and government. And I hope that we're having the same debate we're having right now, 30 years from now, because the only reason we won't be having it, in my view, is that there's no more free speech.
By the way,
I can build up.
hold on 1 second, Ben. Keep in mind when the company goes private, it no longer has to disclose an incredible amount of stuff that public companies have to disclose.
Exactly.
A private company could do some really creative stuff with a country as a
Yeah,
in a form
yeah.
that would never see the light of day, that people would not be able to audit. Go ahead, Ben. You were saying.
Yeah, I think just to build upon what John was mentioning, there's a bigger issue of the presumption of public speech versus private speech in the eyes of laws versus the reality. I think in the olden days, private actors, their ability to monitor or support speeches, it was generally limited. It was really the government that had much more powerful means and platform for public speech, such as the town square analogy, or government official announcements. And this was probably before the internet became a very critical tool in speech. Really, the the issue that we're talking about in terms of companies like Twitter, and in that matter, Facebook, Meta, if you will, they are not just a private speech facilitator, like a maker of a loudspeaker, 30, 40, 100 years ago. Essentially, a lot of the speeches that are being done on these platforms, they are almost governmental speech, as in, when a president would announce the decision of a policy, executive order, or governmental policy of firing someone, hiring someone, instead of official announcement from PR offices of these presidential or governmental agencies, it was on Twitter. Can you imagine if you don't have access to Twitter necessarily, you would not know what the government policy is. And the conflict, it comes in our existing laws. I think we were talking about Section 230. That there was again presumption of this old format, old concept of a private provider of speech platforms. In other words, we would want to give them leeway, room to be able to be free from civil liability if they are just, quote unquote, just a neutral platform provider. So the problem comes when they start, when these Twitter, Facebook type of social media platforms start doing things that are not that neutral, as in removing things from its platform. And that's where Section 230 comes in, which is to provide specific examples of things they can do to remove, to monitor the content, such as, obscene, violent, blah, blah, blah materials. Now, when these platform providers have moved to doing more than just that, such as political speeches, such as things that are outside of the enunciation examples of the Section 230, that's where the problem comes. Is that still guaranteed or protected under Section 230? On a bigger issue that Tyler was talking about, what Elon wanted to do. I found it interesting that he's saying that, nowadays probably Twitter is better off under privatization, right? Because it's not working so far as a public company, and I think. As in Musk thinks it should be still used as a tool for freedom of speech, right? But I just thought of a funny story that that guy that made up a Twitter a tweet of his private plane. Um, he was asked by Musk to shut it off. I'll give you $5,000. And then later on, Musk said, never mind, I'm not going to give it to you. Just do it. So I thought it's kind of interesting. Maybe there's a pretense of making it under privatization of Musk to make it a free speech platform. Yet, can you imagine if it were privatized under his control? Something like that, like what he wanted to do with that teenager, I believe, he could just literally shut it down under his concept of, oh yeah, I love freedom of speech, but just the ones that I like, ones that I don't like, I can shut it off. Anyway, I just thought it's an interesting tidbit. But the main serious point is that I think we're facing with a bigger issue of how to treat and how to regulate these so-called private platform, whether it's owned publicly in the stock market by the general hold stock owners, or by a person like Musk. It's going to be a big issue that we have to deal with going forward.
I've
For
got a few
me,
thoughts.
I also see it that no matter which way you look at this, he is going to be the winner. And he is the way he structured it. As to Tyler's point, knowing that this is the management he has no confidence, he already bought 9% and became the bigger shareholder, right? So now that by in itself has brought in the shares of the company, what, 20% or something like that already. Now he is saying, okay, you're going to have to give it to me. I'm taking this hostile takeover and I will do whatever I want, or else. So either way, even if he buys the company and does whatever he wants, whatever his vision might be, whatever he wants to do with it, Or even if it fails and that he wanted to sell it, like Tyler, to your point, he is the one who's going to be selling it. Of course, he's going to make sure that the price he's going to be selling it to is going to be in a much better position. So he usually does that pump and dump or whatever it might be, like what he did with Dogecoin and things like that. So either way you look at it, he is going to be he is well positioned to be the winner in this situation, to me, the way I look at it.
Messi, just first of all, it's not a hostile takeover. It's a special stock operation, is what it is.
It's not an invasion. It's a special
It's
Yeah,
operation.
splitting hairs.
exactly.
Um,
Nicholas, you had some points you
I
wanted to share.
just, yeah, I want to reflect on a variety of the things that you said. So, number one, yes, of course, we all noted and led by yourself that Elon was always going to look for a play like this because he is the meme king. So, what better property, what better throne for the meme king to sit on than Twitter? There is no better platform. So, I think that was, for anyone watching, it was obvious he would have to make a move like that in order to effectively take on even more power. So, for me, I see Elon as abusing power every time and deceiving people and being erratic. If we reflect back to the trapped boys in Thailand, he behaved erratically and irresponsibly towards the diver fellow. He, as you noted, on purpose manipulated markets, which with his 420 bid, that was very clever, but he knowingly used his power to save his company, rightly so, and he decided to take the pain on that, as Ken noted, that precludes him from certain positions because he cannot be relied upon basically not to do anything that he thinks is the right thing. He does not believe that there is any limit, and as we know, total power is a dangerous thing, and he is, the world's richest man and can and has abused his power, abused the rules, and not been punished sufficiently to stop him, which is why he does this gaslighting approach and uses things that have plausible deniability so that it can be a 420 joke or a 69 joke. And that's us giving him air cover. So he has a fiduciary duty to his shareholders, and where he's the largest shareholder, he benefits. So, absolutely, you're completely correct that he will win whatever happens here because he doesn't need to sell out the shares. He can just short the shares or sell short or contract cover himself to hedge himself on these activities. So he's going to win whatever happens. The clarion call, or the warning bell, was exactly the board seat issue, because when you sign up to be a board member, you have to abide somewhat by the rules, and you do have a fiduciary responsibility to the other shareholders. So the question of whether he was offered and it was withdrawn, or whether he realized that his power and his mimetic, meme king status would be curbed because he would be an insider or he would be regarded as management, is something that he would have taken legal thinking on. I think the other actor that you haven't included in this game is Elliot. Paul Singer is one of the most talented shareholder agitators, and you will note that Singer was in league with Silver Lake, who are probably one of the most powerful investors in Silicon Valley, and they were the ones that agitated for Jack to be thrown off the board after many years of various different groups trying. And they had a very deep view into the new products and the new services. And they confirmed when Parag was promoted that they were happy with that. But you will note that Elliot left the board. Silver Lake remain on the board. Now, if I was Elon, and knowing that he's well advised too, he will, I'm sure, be in conversation with Paul Singer, because Paul Singer is a guy that makes changes. So the question is whether Singer and Musk are acting together, or whether Musk is taking on Singer, or whether Singer is also going to act by understanding that he can't agitate for change and he will sell into that. So there's relationships that exist there with very sophisticated hedge fund managers. On the subject of um, Section 230 publisher platform, I don't think that makes any difference whether you're public or private. You're still going to have the publisher platform issue. The thing that one needs to be fearful about of something like Twitter being in completely private hands is that it becomes, a tool of the meta state. You're getting a BBC for his meta state. So it is a good move. If I was him and minded in that way, I would definitely think that this is a good move. The question of controlling that, however, is all about identity and all about finance. Because at the end of the day, the way that you can actually stop people from this rampant misbehavior is that you can identify who they really are, and everything about connecting that wallet, everything about connecting to the financial system provides identity. And once you do that, you have an amazingly powerful tool. And if I was him, I think that everything that he's doing makes sense for him, but is not in the public interest. We have seen the power of Twitter to misinform and disinform. That's my end of my
Nicholas,
thoughts.
one other thought to piggyback on you, because for those who don't know, Nicholas is more than probably anybody, and I do mean anybody, deep into the digital identity situation. And Elon did say in recent days that anyone who pays the $3 a month, what they're calling Twitter Blue, is Twitter Subscription Pro, if you want to call it Twitter Pro, for $3 a month, he said it should include identity verification, that you get the blue check and you get to go through the process of being verified. That's really interesting, because then you could have people paying a monthly $3 a month. You could have 100 million people paying $3 a month. That's $300 million a month to be identified, to have a verified digital identity that they could then that could be productized. Or Nicholas,
Mm-hmm. Yep, this is exactly the move. If you have the money, this is the move. You get to have a global platform where people effectively are verifying themselves in order that their speech can be monitored, and that he will be reporting that to all the powers that be. We have to know he is deceptive, deeply deceptive. Why do we know that? Because, for example, he said, "I will never have free speech curbed," with regard to the Ukraine situation. But look at what he's doing in Xinjiang, and look at the compromises he's making on free speech in terms of Starlink. And
ouch,
so we need
ouch.
to understand that he is a liar of the first order, and but he's doing it in service of a very, very smart game. He is playing the game perfectly. If he gets this outlet, if he gets an identity technology, if he gets to know everybody, he will have the status, a new status of a meta king. He will have gone from a meme king to a meta king, because he will have a nation state, a digital nation, a digital network economy, and he will have transportation for it. He will have
Oh
Starlink
my
for it.
God.
He will have a platform, a new type of, you don't need a newspaper like Bezos went and bought the Washington Post. You don't need any of that. And you have total control of who can speak and who can't speak and who can challenge you. This is the most dangerous thing you can ever imagine. And people are asleep. And we've walked through this for 3 years. And the whole thing stands on identity. And if you don't get it now, if you don't realize you need a digital declaration of independence, you're just missing.
Oh
And
my God, Nicholas,
I
you just painted the most scariest vision for me.
Well,
I
here's another scenario that you did, since Nicholas brought this up. Everybody is verified. It's also going to eliminate all the disinformation bots that are on there.
not
Now,
necessarily,
I mean,
because did, look, say we're heading towards an election. What does a state actor do? It compromises people's devices just at the right time.
Right, but you're already verified. I mean, I can literally tell you how to map this out, lock it down. It would probably take about 3 to 4 weeks worth of development.
But with device compromise, people who are verified, or their devices are now under the control of a state actor, and they are saying things, and they may not even be aware, at least until it's too late, of what they have been saying as a verified person on a social media platform, say the day before an election.
Now,
Yep. Could
I've worked in security for 22 years on cybersecurity. There are ways to lock this down. You know, I'm trying to figure this one out even with Instagram right now because there's a bot going around taking over everybody's accounts. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I've been writing code for 30 freaking years.
Well, but remember, every device has a baseband processor that the programmer can do nothing about, but it's unclear that state actors, such as or
And
entities like the
nobody,
NSO group, can't do something about them.
right, and you're probably thinking about Pegasus, but Pegasus took over small scales of mobile devices, not large scales. There's a big difference when it comes to that.
It
Let
just
me
depends whether it's
could
worth it to them.
yeah, could I just add in one other point, and that is that it's my hope that there will be two families of of social media and communication platforms. The first family be one where the price of entry is a non-repudiatable identity, a la Nicholas's approach, and the other one is where identity is optional. And the reason for that is that there are things that you can achieve in a non-repudiatable identity space that you cannot achieve in an identity optional space, and there are things you can achieve in an identity optional space that you can't achieve in a non-repudiatable identity mandatory space. And given those distinct use cases served by different identity management requirements, I think that the world would be a safer place if both of those families exist, whether on Facebook, Meta, Metaverse, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. That there's a role for both identity architectures.
John,
let me share
that's
one
that. Let me
thing
let me
with
please let me just respond to that because that's a very technical point, and it needs to be just be quick response. So, John, we always talk about when we talk about the financial systems, because the financial systems are going to be linked to the identity systems. We talk about three options, right? The Chinese Eastern option, the Western option, and the meta. Let's call it the meta state option, not meta, not used in the Facebook term, the real term. So above nation state, right? So those are going to be the three alternatives. The both the command and control version and the Western liberal version will have a form of surveillance capitalism, either state based or surveillance capitalists like Twitter, who will have to comply with the regulations in each of those markets, which is why a meme king in that situation, someone who sits on that throne, will become super powerful because they can disturb and disrupt those nations, and so therefore they will be forced to comply if they want and if they have other properties in those marketplaces. So the solution is the evolution of the technology, which is zero knowledge proofs, which means that you can provably submit information that is acceptable to the centralized forces so that you can participate in one system, not in a broken way that you have to have, a false identity. You can use that identity. You can have a verified identity, but disclose no other information about you as the user, so that you can divorce your opinion if you want, which is the need why you need privacy in order to get to truth, both in elections and any other form of expression of human opinions, because human opinion is what allows us to come to consensus. But when your perceptions are controlled by other people, you don't know whether your perceptions are accurate. You don't know where you are on that information field. So you're in understanding that you need privacy in order to get to truth. You don't need it to have total anonymity. You can have pseudonymity, but still have proof that you're there's someone behind it, not only that you're human, but that you could also attach other information to that so that your opinion was duly noted. So, for example, if you were a doctor in regards to a medical conversation, you can provide attestation proofs using zero knowledge that means you don't have to have that false dichotomy. That's the future. It's possible, and it can be publicly owned, and it can be people powered, and the basis of mathematics is what is going to enable this. So the moves that people are making is in order to get pieces on the chessboard, and none of them are really the decentralized piece. There's still that piece that we can claim for ourselves. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah,
Uh,
if I could
okay.
ask Nicholas a follow up question, because I love your taxonomy, but if I could make a attempt to transform your taxonomy of East, West, and Meta to uh, uh, state based political governance versus more of a public corporation governance versus in the case of the resemblance of Meta in your construct to Meta the company is so profound that I would suggest that that may be the SAR kind of approach that Elon may be pursuing as the third alternative. And so in those
You can't
constructs,
do it
there's
in the way he's doing it with, you cannot do it unless you give it away. That is the paradox. You have to give it away. You cannot keep it for yourself. You cannot do it as Elon. You cannot do it as a private company, public company. You can't do it as a corporation. It has to be owned by the people. So that's why other other projects are not going to be it, because you just create a new king. There can be no king.
Karam, you wanted to make
Yeah,
hold on, Karam.
yeah. Just a quick one. I
Hold on,
wanted to
Karam.
actually.
Very quick. Go. Try and do it in 30 seconds.
I just wanted to share a case because I woke up this morning and we were talking about the payment transfer. So, this is a practical example what happened this morning. So,
30
it would
seconds.
take me more than 30 seconds. Otherwise, you can go on, but this is practically what happened to me. So, somebody actually, took my profile picture. They created a, WhatsApp account, put my profile picture, and they saw that like on the Facebook. They got the UK number from, Simple, because as you know, like you can get a
Got it.
pay as you go.
And the end point is you were
The
deep.
point is like identity. So the point, I mean, he was able to actually extract some money from the people. He went on to the Facebook and got the
Things
business
happen.
account numbers,
Happens
and
millions of
that's
times
how
a day. And your point is
is that the identity we are discussing about on this higher level where this people can get into technically. There's a lot more ways which they can do without getting into technical and make people full of them and just get the money off them. So that was the real case.
there's a huge opportunity in digital identity. Absolutely.
Right.
So then let's go. We covered the top. By the way, usually we go over the biggest stories floating around today. The biggest story happens to be a tech story, which makes it the biggest tech story as well. So it was the Elon Musk offering to buy Twitter. So we do have some Ukraine headlines to go over, as we always do, and there was quite an interesting development on the Ukraine front, where Ukraine sunk Russia's flagship vessel in the Black Sea. And very interestingly, it happened within 24 hours. You'll remember yesterday one of the top stories was Zelensky announced a new stamp. You remember this? And they made a joke about what the hell's a stamp, and I was trying to explain to the young kids that a stamp is basically kind of like an NFT that you put in your mouth and you lick it, and then you stick it on a letter, which is kind of like a physical version of an email. And anyway, the
nice.
It's actually what you're saying is profound, because it is a timestamp. It is a, you can think of it almost like a blockchain.
that's not welcome to my type
Rush
of
stamp
humor.
is a
Try and go deep with the humor. You know what I'm saying? So the point is that 24 hours ago, Zelensky announced the new stamp, which shows. Are you ready for this? I got to pin it to the top of the room so that you can see it, because once you see this stamp, I, I tell me if this isn't him hinting of what was to come. I need a better link that actually shows the image in the. I just pinned it to the top of the clubhouse room. If you click on that, you'll see a photo of the stamp, and it's a photo of a big Russian warship and a Ukrainian soldier giving it the middle finger. And he said this is to commemorate the go fuck yourself. Hey, Russian warship, go fuck yourself. And that's the stamp. Well, within 24 hours, they sunk a Russian warship. Is that a coincidence or not? Did he know, and he very likely did know, that they were going to try and sink that ship within the next 24
It
hours?
didn't sink. It didn't sink.
Yeah, it's severely damaged, but and it's going back to port. But still, Russia's had to respond saying, "Oh yeah, there was a fire on the ship." So whatever happened, Russia still had to come up with a cover story for what happened to the ship, which is very interesting.
This morning, NPR was reporting that all of the personnel had to be evacuated.
All right. So those are that's one of probably the biggest news on the Ukraine front. And
Well,
some, yeah, Johan?
the thing is, this is interesting in more bottoms than you ever can imagine. What this ship, since I discussed this in Piotr's room earlier, I have read up after getting slandered and slapped for coming with comments about that it possibly had nuclear weapons aboard. So I actually read up about Moskva. The thing is that this is the second time this ship has been hit by the same type of missiles. Claimed they used a specific type of missile from Ukraine,
Neptune.
but
Yeah.
Neptune, yes, I was deferring from using the name of it. But the thing was, it was exactly the same missile, exactly the same type of missile that hit in 2008 outside of Georgia, and that it took them almost 1.5 years to repair the ship after that hit. So the extraordinary thing here is that it did get hit by the same type of missile again. So they didn't learn anything from the last time. The next thing is that what this vessel actually had was that it had an aerial dome of control, because this is a very, very heavy anti-aircraft ship. It has ship-to-ship missiles, yes, it has, but it has hundreds of missiles for anti-air. So the thing is that this is a blow to the aerial coverage. I think we can anticipate that we will see a lot of more Ukrainian airplanes in the vicinity around Mariupol, as well as in the south region now, when this specific ship that holds the air superiority by missile is gone. So
Right.
this will be a game changer.
You're right. That's well said. That's what a lot of the military pundits are saying, is that it's such a game changer because this ship enables a lot of the Russian control of the airspace. So another couple of headlines related to Ukraine that are quite interesting that people are not really talking about. One is that the International Criminal Court prosecutor, Karim Khan, is in Kyiv meeting with Ukraine's prosecutor general and working in cooperation with authorities for an independent ICC investigation. That's the International Criminal Court, because they're trying to gather all the evidence to take Russia to task for these crimes against humanity and war crimes, etc. So then there's also the Russia threatens nuclear escalation in the Baltics if Sweden and Finland join NATO. So now you have Russia's response to the headlines we were reading yesterday in the past few days about Sweden and Finland. The prime ministers both saying that they're going to make decisions very soon. Finland said in a matter of weeks, not months. And now Putin and the Kremlin are saying they're going to move nuclear weapons into the Baltic region. I have news for you. They've already done that. That's already happened, as Johan can probably confirm. So that's kind of a weak threat. It appears to be a bit of a threat, when in reality it technically isn't. So that's on the word of Carl Bildt, former prime minister of Sweden says that.
Tyler, what difference does it make where they move the weapons? Because they can hit pretty much from almost anywhere where they've got the range to do it. So
Yeah,
who cares where the
Leningrad. If
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
St. Petersburg is down the fucking street from Helsinki. By the way, I mean it's like it's literally down the street, so it really doesn't make any difference. They can put missiles. No doubt, they have missiles near St. Petersburg, which is you could throw a rock from St. Petersburg and hit Helsinki. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. You're right. That's why I said it's kind of a moot threat that they're
And they
making.
also already have a major naval base right there.
Yeah,
You know what, Kaliningrad? I mean,
yes,
they never moved the nukes out of there. So this is just positioning.
true. That's my
Well,
point.
I actually suspect that hypersonic missiles have something to do with this because um, the, Putin's concern was that there could wind up being hypersonic missiles in Ukraine, which is close enough to Moscow that perhaps, given the response time of anti missile defenses, assuming they're not energy beams, that he would now be worried, or the Russian government would now be concerned that something could hit Moscow before missile defenses had a chance.
Now, you remember I've been saying all along, even before Ukraine ever happened, you starting from the earliest days, a year ago, that there would be this escalation of the U.S. versus Russia and China, very notably, and that even when Ukraine was just getting started, when Putin was putting tanks around Ukraine, I mentioned, he that Ukraine would fight, and they've been fighting, and then as soon as the fighting started, I said, well, my conspiracy theory is that America is not. Let me put it this way: I think the U.S. is quite happy with what happened with the flagship in the Black Sea today. Just as an example, I think they're absolutely thrilled about that. And remember, we read a headline a week ago that Nancy Pelosi was thinking about going to Taiwan. Remember that one, Cheryl? And
Yep, until he got COVID.
she got, and then it was revealed that she had to cancel because of COVID. And China says, don't even think about going to Taiwan, Nancy. There will be very strong um, escalation or reciprocation if Nancy Pelosi goes to Taiwan, right?
Maybe that's why she got COVID. Wink, wink.
At the same time,
Well,
yeah.
check this out. So the headline right now that BB found, well done BB, from Nikkei Japan, again, and I love Nikkei Japan, and for good reason. They're fantastic. It's one of the best publications on the planet. And it's said, Nikkei Japan's headline is that 6 U.S. lawmakers have now arrived on the tarmac in Taiwan on an unannounced trip. Oh, why was it unannounced? Geez, I wonder.
Because originally the police they are planning to go is Australia, and they suddenly show up here. So
And they're on it. I'm sure it's not Air Force One, but on a plane that looks a lot like Air Force One. It includes the chairman of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Menendez, and landed in Taiwan on Thursday for an unannounced visit. 6 leading lawmakers show up unannounced. They're just probably there to just have some milk tea. Just kind of kick back, maybe get a sauna. Hang out a little bit.
BB, do you
Okay,
have any theme parks there in Taiwan? Like,
yeah,
is any cool places to like relax when you're there?
they're just there
Yeah,
for
but you
cherry
know what,
blossom.
and
Tyler?
Tyler, and some supplements. And I've told you that our president Tsai was under quarantine as well, so they definitely planned this trip because this is just the day she was released from the quarantine. Yeah.
Now, by the way, the headline from Nikkei Japan says that they arrived Thursday for an unannounced visit in a show of support to Taiwan in the face of Chinese pressure. Do you understand how China perceives this? They perceive this as
A
wildly
threat.
aggressive. A huge, wildly aggressive threat. Wildly aggressive threat is how they perceive this.
It's like if Putin visited Cuba and said, "Hey, let's consider how we can figure out how to make Florida a little bit more Spanish again."
Right. And
Even
did
if
No,
I,
even if he
did I,
Or
just
the
showed
did
up,
Haitian
I,
president agreeing
I
to.
just want to recall, wasn't there some white dude a few weeks ago saying about how the U.S. might could potentially cajole at any time China into overreacting over Taiwan simply by hinting, whispering in the back channels anything about Taiwan independence. We could force China into aggressively acting at a time when they're going through massive COVID and starvation strikes and the whole shebang. Did I not say 3 weeks ago, watch out, what's going to happen in 3 weeks when China goes through COVID and their property market collapsing all simultaneously, that we might see the U.S. do something with Taiwan similar to what how Russia is now being cajoled into Ukraine. Did I or did I not say that 3 weeks ago, Cheryl?
There's another event happening internal Chinese politics with internal elections. Well, a lot of people perceive China as being monolithic, and it's like it's always been there for 1,000 years. Not actually. It's only been relatively recently that power is concentrated in Beijing, like post like the 2008 Olympics, that kind of stuff.
But my
But
memory's
what's interesting is that at the internal politics, they have internal elections occurring here, with Xi being able to like permanently cede his power, but he hasn't gone through that process entirely yet. If they go through enough domestic conflict in a very short period of time, that window is very small, but it could actually upset some of the power base internally. So
So
there
are
might be
you
some that
excited
affect some of
by
the
that?
calculus.
Are you excited? I mean, do you think that uprise is good? Because just as Americans and Europeans are paranoid about all these other places that have uprisings, are you all ready for a wave? Let's just say there is an uprising and turmoil. Are you ready for another wave of people coming to our borders? Are you guys ready for that?
It's not about borders. This is about long-term conflict. This is
I'm
about
not talking
long-term
about that.
power
I
games.
get everybody's. I'm talking about people being excited about government changes. That's all I'm talking about.
No,
Know that
it's
there
war is
might be
horrifying.
changes.
Yeah,
okay.
This
it's
So,
this
it's
isn't a
more
good
just
thing.
it's
but
more just a matter of this is what happens when great powers start to plan for 10, 20 year, 30-year time frames. The United States military is one of the only institutions in America, anything, that plans for more than 5 to 10 years out, like at all. In China, they have many more institutions that have long range planning. America has very, very few. The military is one of the only ones that does. And the reason why that's relevant, it's like them and maybe a couple banks. The reason why that's relevant is that when you see the actions that the military takes, they often don't make sense for short term engagements. But when you look at longer term time frames and the long term goals, it makes a lot more sense about why certain actions are taken.
I just want to clarify. BB or Messi or Ken or somebody who has a lot of flight time and was likely to have heard it. Did I say 3 weeks ago that China's going to go through COVID before they had really got into the deep water, deep end of the pool where they are now with COVID? And I did say China's going to go through COVID and it's going to be hell, right? Did I? Let's start there. Did I say that, BB, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and that's
Yes,
now.
you.
Yes, I did. Okay, now did I also say that that's also going to be interesting timing because their property market, which is their biggest market, that bubble's also going to pop simultaneously, kind of in concert with that, right? That is happening.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Did
It's
I
the
did I not then say that that would be an unusually, uniquely opportunistic moment for the U.S. to antagonize China on this issue of Taiwanese independence? That would set the stage of an opportunity where China would be too weak to really properly retaliate as they're going through COVID and this economic, upheaval, where we might see the U.S. start to flex on symbolically recognizing Taiwanese independence. Did I not hint at that? I said, watch out. This could happen in about 3 weeks. Or did I, or do you not recall me
yeah,
making
you
that?
said that, but yeah, partially agree and partially suspected, but still, actually, why more and
I
more?
don't think it was, no. I don't, I would say,
But kindly let me
I
bring up
believe
the
when I made
reason.
that, I believe when I made that prediction, people thought I was batshit crazy that the U.S. would start recognizing and hinting at Taiwanese independence in 3 weeks, which is now
So
happening.
you
That's
got pushback.
I
You
don't think
actually
I
got
don't think you were
pushback.
batshit crazy. I think I totally agree with you on that. But we better be ready for the chaos.
So
Yeah, yeah.
we
Uh,
are. And
Go
then
ahead.
Tyler, when you mentioned it, you did get pushback, but I think it's because the question was, why would America have any incentive to
right,
create chaos for China
right.
and Russia? And your response was because it benefits us. The
Right.
war in Russia should continue in order to benefit us, in order to break the resources that Russia has. And in line with that, to sort of delineate the line that has been drawn since last year, America has to do something quite strategic to stop China and Russia and some of the other countries that are aligning with them to really forge a fist that can then compete with the West.
I'll tell you what. Let me explain partly why there's an urgency to do this is because it's happening under Biden's watch. Biden knows if Trump comes back in, it's game over. It's going to be Putin, best buddies, hanging out in the White House, popping bottles at the club again, and forget it. That shit could go.
This is a reset of the Cold War. This is like, okay, we're going back, and this time Russia's the winner. Now let's map out how relationships are. It's quite different, very different.
Okay, anyway, so thank you for finding that article from Nikkei Japan, Bibi, and back. Yes.
Just very quick, just very quick. I want to explain why more and more those the high ranking officials coming to Taiwan. Actually, it was based on this Taiwan Travel Act that was passed under Trump administration. So I would say the situation right now after the Russia Ukraine conflicts. So actually, I will say both. The US government, the China government, Taiwan are all observing how the wars between Russia, Ukraine goes, and then free sides will decide correspondingly. So not that easily to say the US government will switch the strategic ambiguity to the strategic uh, clearance. So yeah, that's just my quick supplement. But yeah, let's keep continue the
Okay.
conversation. Yeah.
Article number 2, and we got to stick with tradition and do the air horn for Christ's sakes. It'd be a shame to break a year of tradition. So the second biggest story is that the U.S. government agencies warn of a new custom tools created by several APT actors, those are hackers, that are capable of compromising IT equipment used in critical infrastructure.
It's almost
Several,
like a commercial version of Stuxnet. Like they were really unhappy about this because they like having a monopoly on factoring industrial control equipment. But now it's like now there's wild versions. They're like, oh crap, this is everywhere now.
several advanced persistent threat, that's APT, several APT actors, advanced persistent threat actors, have created custom-made tools designed to breach IT equipment used in critical infrastructure facilities, according to a new advisory from multiple U.S. agencies. In an alert released on Wednesday, that's today, yes? No, yesterday, the Department of Energy, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known as the CISA, and the National Security Agency, that's the NSA, and the FBI, that's the FBI, warned critical infrastructure operations of potential attacks targeting multiple industrial control systems and supervisory control data. Jesus, it sounds like, why didn't anyone warn us here?
Well,
Why
well,
wasn't there some handsome bald white guy warning for several months now that all of our core infrastructure, water, food, and energy had become digitized and was going to be cyber attacked? Once there was, the preambles of some hot conflict coming, months down the road. Why wasn't there
So
this
Tyler, this
some
stuff,
white
our
warning?
infrastructure is outdated by decades, right? So if you guys want to hear more on this, there's a couple of rooms on Friday afternoons about. There's one every other Friday, so it's probably this Friday on physical infrastructure. But our infrastructure is highly outdated, and I think Chris has opined on this that it's kind of a rip out and replace level of outdatedness, and it's been infiltrated. We've got latent malware ready to go, and the question has been, everyone's like, well, they haven't done it yet, and so people are like, they haven't done it yet, must not work, and it's like, no, they just aren't activating it because cyber war is it's a new area, and that's what people are opining as to why it hasn't been activated. Yes, but all of our infrastructure is, as we've been
Yeah.
amplifying in this room, is can be taken down, and there have been attacks. They're not highly publicized as well. I mean, I think it was either 6 or 12 months ago, the one in Florida where they got in the water, and other areas. So again, yeah, it's there. It's not like we just warned about it 3 months ago. It's been this way for many decades, and people
I want to get nitty gritty
expecting.
on this. I want to get a little
I
nitty
just
gritty. Hold on, I'll
I
go to
just
you
want to
next. Nicholas, I'll turn to you. Watch this. So in this alert that was sent out yesterday, the alert says that the tools used in the attacks were designed specifically for Schneider Electronic Programmable Logic Controllers. Those are called PLCs. Another company called Omron, and Open Platform Communications Unified Architecture, OPC UA servers. So my point is, at the end of the day, this is all about physical hardware that has software on it, and they're going to do, they're going to try and look for vulnerabilities. Now, the point I want to make here is the reason that the U.S. is in the privileged position at the end of the day. Keep this in mind when it comes to if we ever get into the first world war of cyber wars, right? The U.S. has a unique advantage, asymmetrical advantage, because we make disproportionately or design a whole lot of the hardware, and Schneider Electronic and Omron and Open Platform Communications, OPC, we can get into the nitty gritty of a lot of hardware, and we control a lot of that hardware, and that gives us a purview into how to button things up. Now, similarly, when it gets sold internationally, some country in Asia buys this stuff, we can work with those companies to find where the backdoors are in ways that Thailand, for example, if they're running some of this hardware, would not know that there's backdoors in this stuff in the way that the Americans would, because the NSA and the CIA and the FBI will go to Schneider and be like, hey, we need to have a look at your schematics and how you design that thing. And we're going to have our own, we're going to have a deeper level of knowledge about the devices than other countries who purchase this hardware. So if you're the hardware manufacturing country, you're going to have an asymmetrical advantage when it comes to the Armageddon of cyber warfare. Go ahead, Nicholas.
I just wanted to make the general comment on everything that you're saying and everything that you're rightly witnessing that you have amplified, as Jennifer said rightly. These things have been going on for a very long time, for as long as technology has existed. The centralized powers have fed information, misinformation, reasons for wars, etc., etc., etc. And so we're just at the natural outcome of the previous era. And whilst you note it's about hardware, it's really about software as well. And
Yeah.
it's about systems design, and it's about patching, and it's about the best and brightest not going to work for Schneider necessarily, but nor for the government, but to going to work on pizza delivery apps and other waste of time things that were similar. Brain drain happened to Wall Street, etc. And that's because of the incentive of money. So we are in a cyber war, and these persistent threats are the same persistent threats which are China and Russia and other state actors, North Korea, Iran. Basically, this is a constant war. And it's just that during times of great stress, which started with the GFC and then floated into this zero interest rate policy world and what is basically the post-truth world and then the post-trust world, leads to a series of revelations for the population. And the revelations are that they can no longer trust anything, they can no longer understand the truth. And what you're really doing is seeding information chaos. And what the beneficiaries of those are is that people who have great centralized power can destabilize the other systems of social consensus, and that affects us as humans. So everything that is happening now is going to cause more and more polarization and just unsubstantiated beliefs unless we figure out the new technologies. And that's what I think we're just in this final throes of the last
Nicholas,
version
I'm
of
not.
this.
Nicholas, can I
Nicholas,
jump in? Wait, can I jump in on that? Because I just want to jump in on a
J-
couple of his points
Jennifer,
really quickly.
hold on,
Sorry,
Natalie.
just really.
Yes, Jennifer, and then Nasla. Go ahead.
Okay, so first off, yeah, for Tyler on the
actual hardware and firmware, I don't think we have any lead there, and there are vulnerabilities and backdoors everywhere. So it would be who is better at this, and they're saying that like Russia, looking at what they did, they were not as skilled at implementing their cyber war as people expected, but that doesn't mean it's not there ready to go. To Nicholas's point, this decentralizing and decentralizing, and the points he made about we are in cyber war. It just looks differently. I mean, people are very used to having something what we can see and attribute, and we're all seeing the damage. We don't see it. It's not right in front of our faces, and we can't attribute it. Like here, something comes from Russia, Ponti or one of their ransomware gangs who has officially said they've been they're working for the government and at the direction of the government, whereas we have Anonymous, who is more of a vigilante gang. So it just looks different, but disinformation is another vector of cyber war, and they're extremely effective. We're all very effective at this one. And that's been going on both internally, if you look at like our own elections on ourselves or by the Russians on us, and that disinformation and that whoever is centralized, whether it be a nation state, so Russia doing it to us, or a platform. So right now you've got the top 5 platforms controlling the information. So decentralizing that, which is the move towards, as Nicholas is saying, I don't think we're going to be a big decentralized population anytime in the near foreseeable future, but decentralizing it, so moving away from Google and doing your search via trusted communities like on Reddit and Discord, et cetera. So you're decentralizing that, because the disinformation guerrilla warfare that's going on right now is notable. And then I think techie people on the stage can speak to the backdoors and vulnerabilities that are built in. My understanding is backdoors are built in, and you don't see them until they've been utilized. And so there are a lot of backdoors in everything. So for people to just be aware of that, we run security rooms, I'd say 4 days a week on this stuff. So if people have questions, Tom's usually here, I'm here, but we have standing security rooms all week. And I know a lot of people on the stage are in this as well. Thanks.
I'd like to
Aslak,
follow up with Les
hold
after
on,
he's
Chris.
done.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Aslak, and then Chris.
Yeah, I'm one of those who also kind of drinks the Kool-Aid of the decentralized, kind of thinking. The thing that I'm just kind of worried about is not necessarily the technology always, because as Nicholas often puts it so eloquently, the tech is pretty much there. There's not very many puzzle pieces missing. It's really the literacy of, how that transition to a kind of a more decentralized system is put into place. And what's missing usually is actually the governance structures around the decentralized systems, the thinking and the idea. So it's more of a war of ideas that needs to be put into place than the tech. And that's something for greater minds. But I think that's definitely something that has to be put into place. But even though it would be in place, it's really hard to put that transition into place, explaining it to kind of the common man in a sense, right? Or woman, if you will.
That's where economic incentives come in. You have to have a self-evident economic incentive. That is what drives the adoption of these new technologies. It's the difference between read write, and read write own. The ownership piece is that you have value in that system, and you can just go and claim it by uh, joining in with your fellow man and understanding that it's in your economic best interest. And that's why you can't have an Elon or a Twitter taking that space, because they'll want to own too much of the network. It needs to be of, by, and for the people.
Chris.
Um, yeah, so I just want to kind of chime in here briefly with so Jennifer hosts some amazing rooms on cybersecurity stuff, and the people that are attracted to that tend to be people that are actually practicing in the field and have an enormous amount of knowledge. So those are great rooms. Just want to reemphasize that for people that want to learn more about this. But one point I want to push back specifically on was when we talk about backdoors, is this is makes a lot more sense when we start talking about network controllers, the backbones of the internet, consumer devices. Yeah, these very much have backdoors built in. The stuff that's happening in industrial space is actually kind of a little bit weirder. So when you build a giant facility, like let's say an oil refinery, like they're in the picture, or you might have a chemical plant, etc. These are very large, capital-intensive investments. You'll easily spend hundreds of millions to billions of dollars on these big pieces of equipment that literally you bring one online and like the global capacity goes up by like 5 or 10%. Like there aren't that many in the world that have these things in any particular industry. The reason why that's relevant is that takes a lot of money to pay for those things, which means that you'll typically go to a bank and you'll say, hey, give us a lot of money up front, fund this thing,
and then we'll pay it off after 10, 20, 30 years or so. Sometimes the payback times are very long. The reason why that's relevant from a tech perspective is that when they decide, well, what kind of industrial control equipment should we use for this? What kind of microcontrollers? What kind of hardware? Well, they're going to say we want the most well-tested, proven thing because they're only going to be a small part of the capital budget, but we need to make sure it doesn't break all the other equipment. Let's go with the most well-tested, standardized stuff out there. And so what ends up happening is it ends up being extremely conservative on the types of technology they adopt. Now, if you're some hotshot tech company that wants to do some crazy flashy things, this isn't flashy stuff. It's like turn this tank of water on and off every day at 6 p.m. And by the way, if it ever doesn't do that exactly at the right time, the whole thing breaks. So you get very boring, very reliable stuff. Now, here's where it comes into relevance for the security component. Most of the security paradigms they're operating on are 10, 20, 30 years out of date. A lot of them are designed with the idea of security on premises, which is physical hardware security, which normally is a good thing, but it has to be paired with a really intelligent software side. But here's what the reason why that's a big deal is because when they say physical security, what that normally means is no digital security. And I wish I could just iterate how bizarre this is in a cyber infrastructure. Most industrial platforms, most industrial setups do not have digital security at all. The thing is, they were designed with the idea of being on a separate network that would never talk to the internet. And that was when they designed the security for these systems. They wanted to make sure that it never, ever, ever touches its communications elsewhere. And so that was how most of the security was designed. If you're in the network, that means you're physically on the premise, which means you're a badged employee or a badged security person or a badged manager. That sounds great. Now, what happened about 10, 15 years ago is a bunch of MBAs came out to all the industrial places and they said, hey, imagine you could have, they used different language at the time, but essentially they'd say it today, imagine you could have a digital transformation. You can now look at your stuff wherever you are in the world and see all of your operations in your comfy office in HQ. And so what they started to do is then connect all of these industrial centers without internal security to the internet. And the outcomes of this are astounding. You only need a single physical device connected to these industrial centers to get full access to every device inside. That's literally the architecture of these things. And they're fascinating to watch, and we can go more in depth like some other time with things, but I want to kind of wrap it here. But the reason why this is important is that when groups like the NSA and they've got CISA and all these other ones, and they make this big deal about, oh no, there's this huge cybersecurity thing. They've compromised all these things. I wish it was something exotic, but the bar is so low on this. There's a search tool called Shodan. Yeah, if you can look things where you can basically look for a certain class of device and get like baby monitors and stuff, and it basically is like seeing all the public devices that are connected to the internet. And what's crazy about it is you can just type in like brands of different devices, like certain industrial microcontrollers and such, and then sure enough, you just get all of the factories in the world that have their microcontrollers hooked up to the public internet by brand name, which means that if you have a very simple off the shelf, like, hey, we found out how to get past that one layer, have all the factories in the world that have that microcontroller are now basically you've got an access point. And so when they're screaming about this, it's not something that's oh, you need to patch something. The systems that we have deployed are so out of date and from such a different security model, you literally have to start over. But right now, they're still trying to say, I don't want to spend 10 years worth of R&D, or I don't want to upgrade my factory because that means I have downtime, which means I lose my financial investment on it. And so there is a lot of misinformation about what's going on. And part of what's unhealthy about the NSA and these other groups promoting this idea of, oh no, the Reds are coming to get us type kind of thing, is it's promoting a very false narrative of the industrial incompetence when you had generations of MBAs say, we can build this, we don't need security, don't worry, we've got it covered, and never bothering to actually listen to their own security people say, this won't work. Anyway, so that's a long rant, but I
Wait,
hope that helps a little bit.
yeah, to also put that in perspective, if you like, I've been a product attorney for 20 years, right? And privacy by design is still not baked into the design process. Security by design is nowhere near a front consideration, especially. And again, this goes from big infrastructure to your apps. If you think any of your apps are secure, forget it. So, and don't look at the privacy policies because even if they have one, it's not going to describe what they're actually doing. But
that said, to Chris's point, a lot of this stuff, it's very, very, it would be expensive to do it. And this is not just private stuff. This is all of your infrastructure, public stuff, your PG&E, whoever else. It's highly expensive, and they're not going to incur that. In the electric area, allegedly, it's because of the politics of passing that rate increase onto the ratepayers is some insurmountable hurdle. But also, it's when now, like the rooms that we run, they do have this. Uh, Combining the physical and digital security, but as Chris has noted, it's woefully just out of date. And you can look at it. There are no national standards on this, which would be impossible to do because it's different by what the actual infrastructure is, or the platform is, and what is the risks analysis there. But it's if you look at this, they are moving like a Titanic, kind of slightly turning in better directions. They have better people at the top in Jen Easterly at NIST, et cetera. So they're moving in that direction, but there's no national standards to even hold someone to. So I negotiate contracts and I say we have reasonable security all the time because it's a meaningless term. But anyway, so everything Chris said is exactly right.
Okay.
Question,
I don't
Jennifer.
want to.
Oh,
What's
wait,
your
I don't want
one
to.
quick
I don't
one,
want
and
to.
one quick one. That Lapsus group. I mean, here's a great example. That Lapsus group that just took down Nvidia and whoever else. Those guys were like, I think the leader was 21, and the rest of them were like 16. I mean,
I was going
That
to
is
say,
his
right.
dad thought he's
That
playing
is right.
games.
yeah.
I just
Okay.
think that we need to, if we want to just to put the cherry on the cake, as everything that Chris said is right. And one of the things that he said is particularly apposite is that everything is driven by money. And at the core of the fight that we're having, the hot war that we're having, it's a money war, because we're using the system, the SWIFT system, the Western liberal democratic system, to enforce the only thing that we're willing to do, which is restrict their ability to access the economy. The attack that will have the most devastating effect is the one that affects the accounting of money, because you will not be able to make those payments to make those giant machines work, because, as Chris said, they rely on a giant amount of money to function. And if you stop the money, you stop the functioning of the global economy. So that's the thing that one should be watching. And you should know that the security that surrounds our banking system is as archaic as the rest of the infrastructure.
One very, very last point I
Yeah,
want to out here, just is very brief. The microcontrollers themselves 20, 30 years ago would easily be 10 grand a piece for controlling industrial hardware. The thing is that because chips have gotten so cheap now, you're looking at about $4 for a little Raspberry Pi Micro that can run some TensorFlow AI. It can actually do extremely advanced stuff, have the same capabilities, control the same equipment. All it needs to do is just be programmed. But because that's not a typical component, it seems to be new and exciting rather than old and boring and boring and predictable. A lot of MBAs aren't willing to sign off on that, especially people that commission plants. If you wanted to redesign these plants, or you want to do retrofit, rip out, and replace, the actual physical cost of the microcontrollers is like, if for about 100 grand, that's like the price of like a Silicon Valley engineer, like one dude. You can replace 30,000 microcontrollers across the entire like plant. The thing is that if unless you've designed that for it, it can be difficult to anticipate what those components are. So you're going to need to have a huge amount of engineering labor going into designing them and to work on different hardware and then securing those. And that's a labor skill up in software that a lot of plant managers who aren't used to things that they can't see, they aren't used to allocating resources towards that. And so that's the cultural industrial shift that needs to happen.
Okay. Next big tech story is the Jack Dorsey first tweet, the setting up my Twitter, which sold many months ago as an NFT. An NFT of Jack's tweet sold for, at the time, $2.9 million last year. And it has been put back up for auction with a maximum bid of around $6,000. Crypto entrepreneur Sina Estavi bought Twitter founder Jack Dorsey's first ever tweet as an NFT for $2.9 million last year. And that turns out to have been not such a smart investment as it appears right now. So the next story is that Apple says, oh, well, yesterday we read about Meta's or Facebook's plans to take a 47.5% cut of virtual sales on their metaverse platform, Horizon Worlds. And so now Apple is commenting to say that Meta's plans to take this 47% cut of sales lays bare the hypocrisy of criticizing Apple's 30% cut on their Apple App Store. Because Facebook does criticize the 30% App Store cut and says, well, we're not going to charge you if you're using our Facebook tools to make a newsletter, or you're making videos on Facebook videos, or the like. We're not going to take any fees at all. Ha ha. So there, look at Apple. They're the evil guys charging you 30%. And now Apple's correctly pointing out the hypocrisy of criticizing Apple when you are now going to charge 47% on your platform in the metaverse.
The nuance is that what they're really saying was, if you're going to charge, you really got to charge more than that.
You know what I think? I think Facebook is doing the classic negotiation tactic of charging so much that they got a whole lot of free marketing, and they're now going to appear to be incredibly generous by marking it down for the low price of 20%.
That's
27.
exactly what I thought they were doing when you first brought this up.
So the next one is from the New York Times. It says, since the Ukraine invasion, thousands of Russian tech workers have left the country, an exodus that will fundamentally change the Russian tech industry. Since their country invaded Ukraine, Russian tech workers have left by the thousands. They appear intent on rebuilding their lives and businesses in other countries, aka the brain drain being covered by the New York Times. And they're right, that could have notable impact. The next is from Dean Takahashi at VentureBeat. He says there's a report that just came out showing that U.S. tech investments in Q1, January, February, March, remain very strong at just over $70 billion. But IPOs and exits have slowed after 3 consecutive quarters. So there you go. The next is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that Ava Labs, the lead developer of the Avalanche blockchain, is raising $350 million at a $5 billion valuation. Good for them. The next is Reddit updates its searches.
If they're raising money, they're not decentralized, then don't use them.
You're continuing to optimize the most pithy way to make that point. I like how you manage to remove one syllable or word each time.
I'm getting faster and faster.
Yes, you're getting it down to a bumper sticker. So the next one
The end point is cancel centralized.
That is awesome.
is turning into a
People
haiku.
power. People
Yeah.
powered.
The next one is that Reddit is updating their search abilities to index the comments in Reddit instead of just the titles of the posts.
Wait,
So
Reddit having search? That's it's the joke is that it has one of the worst search engines on the internet. So the idea that they
yes,
actually are spending any time on it is
yeah,
hilarious.
I'll tell you why. By the way, here's why. Because Reddit, the amount of content that's happening over in Reddit land is non-trivial. There's quite a
It's
bit of content.
faster for them to just feed it all to an AI and create a sentient being on the internet than it is to get like an actual search function to find a dumb meme somewhere. They're finding it
No,
faster
but
just to
here's what
feed
happened.
it to OpenAI.
Here's what's happening. There was a really interesting article, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, about how doing Google searches, in many cases, you'll get better results in Google by adding the word Reddit to the end of your Google search so that it'll bring up and try
You
and find.
search a pizza in New York.
Say again?
I said, Tyler, you did a search on the best pizza in
Oh,
New
right.
York.
We actually tested this in this room when we read that headline by testing Best Pizza New York. Thank you, BB, for the reminder. And we did Best Pizza New York in Google, and then we did Best Pizza New York Reddit in Google. And it turned out that the Reddit one was better in giving thoughts on what is the best pizza in New York. That the Reddit community had a community about pizza or about New Yorkers reviewing pizza, That's some pretty good freaking content that Google isn't prioritizing for reasons because Google intelligently knows that Reddit could, with all of that sweet, juicy, high grade curated content, if indexed properly, could chip away at their search engine market share. And they know that because in Korea, Naver, the search engine that Koreans love, is in a way rather Reddit-esque. It's a lot of communities talking endlessly, person to person, people powered. And so Google's always known that that kind of an environment, a digital platform of people discussing things in a curated way, can have good quality signals if it's indexed properly. And so Reddit has been sleeping on a potentially valuable trove of content that they need to index properly.
Hey,
And
Tyler,
Google
can
is
I
paid.
jump on that?
Or you could
It's a
say
very
Wait,
brief
not
point. Google's
only
people power
wait,
too is just
wait.
10,000 people in Bangladesh first, rather than people that
No,
actually live in New York.
Chris. Yeah, it's the this. Who's that guy over at A16? Not the Chris one. That's the new bazillionaire. The other one is always talking about um, next steps in metaverse. Anyways,
Balaji,
the guy.
Balaji.
Yeah, him. Yeah, Balaji. So there's a
false
long form
prophet.
interview with him. Either way, interesting, super interesting discussions. But anyways, part of the Web3 decentralizing is Google serves up what Google wants to serve up. The way they've indexed it, and then based on how they've indexed the internet, right? It's not just um, random or by most searched, et cetera. You've got your ads, et cetera. Reddit is community value. So this is where if Reddit gets ahead of this, this is where things will go with the social proof. Back to a little bit of what Nicholas talks about is that you're going to start trusting trusted sources and trusted
Correct.
communities and et cetera. Good and bad, it'll drive you into like-minded people, but good because it will be, as you said, it's a community of people that are there and like this stuff. And so if Reddit hops on it, they have a
Watch.
huge opportunity.
Let me
It's a shift from where and what to
correct.
who.
Precisely. I'll even go even more granular than that, having been part of a human powered search engine backed by Elon Musk and Sequoia. Let me explain. So, Google, main innovation was PageRank, and it was pages linking to each other. And that was working very well in the early days of Google until Demand Media and ourselves, Mahalo, started paying people to generate lots of content that indexed very well in Google. And they did an IPO on that. And as soon as they IPO'd Demand Media, also out of Santa Monica, Google did a recalculation and realized we don't want 20 different Wikipedias and private Wikipedias based on advertising filling the top 10 of Google, which we were doing. All of our pages were indexing very high in Google. So Google totally revamped their algorithm, completely flipped it on its head, away from the amount of pages inbound linking to each other, because the theory that the thought is if Tiger Woods writes a blog post about golf, it should outrank. It doesn't matter where he posts it, on which website he posts it. It should outrank a blog post I write about golf as somebody who's never played it, even if I write it on golfdigest.com. So the point is that it's about authority. Now, this is where the Korean search engine and why Google has always had such a hard time penetrating the Korean market, because Naver is based on precisely that. It's a Q&A format of humans asking each other questions, and people develop points over time that are incredibly valuable because you become known as the expert on golf because you've answered the most questions about golf and gotten the most. The community upvotes you as the winner with the best answer, and now you've become the golf authority, and now you can leverage that monetarily for your business because you have a golf shop or a golf course or you're a golf teacher or whatever it is, and you're a ping pong coach and a tennis coach and a yoga professor or whatever. So you have a real financial interest in being the best yoga answer provider because you can leverage that for real monetary value. And that's why when you ask Koreans, why don't you use Google? They say, are you fucking crazy? I've already invested 5 years becoming the yoga professor on the main search engine. Google gives me nothing as the yoga professor. So I'm going to invest my time on this platform that rewards me back. Google knows how difficult it is to take market share away from that format, which Reddit has similarities to because people are upvoting the top comments on Reddit posts. And that's why them indexing the comments which are already human curated, ranked by the community, is of interesting value. And they can take, if they tweak that just a bit, they could start to build something that is very valuable for search indexing. Yeah.
Now just
Hey,
remove the
Tyler.
companies. Now
No,
just take exactly that and remove the companies and have it owned by the people that are contributing the information.
It's the
well,
dream.
also
That's
though,
all that
That
needs
Tyler,
would
to
you
be
made a
happen.
great
beautiful.
Tyler, your point on Google changing the algorithm. So people also need to remember, because so many people are living and using and everything social, all this content on all of these platforms. Facebook, Google, or any of them can revise their algorithms in their favor at any time, including if your business is built on their platform. So just a light point that you made in the beginning, I wanted to re-highlight.
Very, very briefly, when people are talking about the AI versus human powered, when Vint Cerf was called to Mr. Father of the Internet, which is hilarious that he's got a great PR department for that. He's working with Google with things, and they're saying is testifying in front of Congress, and Congress actually wants to find out how this stuff actually works. They actually describe a very different architecture from what you'll find from Google's public marketing and their IPO materials and such. When they were saying we're essentially one giant supercomputer with the best AI and all this other stuff, which there is a grain of truth to that. But what's a lot more interesting is how much actual human labor goes into organizing the source results. You're looking at like 10,000 is what Google admits to when you look at the secondary, third-party contractors, etc. You're looking at about 100,000 people whose sole job is to manually uprank the top terms. Now, that might sound like impossible. It's like there's an infinite amount of content. Actually, there's not. There's only about 2,000 words people use on a daily basis, about 30,000 that they can recognize. There's only 100,000 words in the English language. And that's for the English language. But when you look at the cross language terms, you're looking at something within about 10 to 30,000 terms. And that's all that people can come up with. And yeah, you can combine them to make more complex language. But the thing is that with language search, you only don't have to get perfect. You just need to get close enough, and then people will figure out the difference. And they recognize it and say, good enough. The reason why this is relevant is there is a massive amount of human labor that goes into creating these information systems, and a lot of that labor is obscured. It makes her some very sexy looking balance sheets when you say we only have this many employees and look at how much value they're able to provide for Wall Street. What they aren't showing is the underpaid workers in third world countries who don't always have the same grasp on human language. The reason on English language, sorry. The reason why that's very relevant is that when you start seeing organic searches and other competitors start to emerge, one of the things they're continuously shocked about is how little labor it actually takes, but also how it doesn't take the bar is much lower than they think because they're assuming that you need massive supercomputers, armies of tens of thousands of people, etc. It's not actually that much. The thing is, you only need that much if you're trying to monopolize the market, if you're trying to dominate every last aspect of it. But you'll always leave niches and stuff exposed. And so this is one of the things where when you look at the actual architecture of how Google has architected their stuff over time, and whenever they say an AI breakthrough of this, or that, looking at who actually provides the labor for the training data and how it's actually deployed for anti-competitive market reasons, it reveals a much more honest accounting of how the tech infrastructure is currently set up.
Okay. Next up is TikTok is testing a way for users to dislike comments to help users feel more in control of what they see. Dislike counts will be hidden. So yeah, like another new vector in the algorithm input. Apple customers say delivery estimates for orders have been pushed back in some cases as far as mid-June amid China's lockdowns. And by the way, that could get worse because it looks like COVID's about to go into Guangzhou, which is where Shenzhen is, which is where a lot more of this stuff gets made. That like the tech consumer electronics. That's the center of the consumer electronics world is Shenzhen. And if Shenzhen has a lockdown in the same way that Shanghai has had, oh boy, are we in for a scarcity during Christmas this year or something like that.
No iPhones.
Yeah. So the next one is for the Wall Street Journal says after the pandemic forced employees to work from home, some neurodivergent people are thriving at remote cybersecurity jobs.
They don't have to interact with people. It's great.
The COVID-19 pandemic forced many employees to work from home, leveling the playing field for people with conditions such as autism who might not fare as well in office meetings. Wikipedia editors have voted 232 to 94 to request that basically Wikipedia stop accepting crypto donations. Why would they vote in favor of stopping crypto donations? Critics argue that Bitcoin and Ethereum networks consume too much energy. And so
Yeah,
they
let's run with that one. That's there's a lot of other reasons, but for some reason that's the only one that seems to resonate with people, which is complete bullshit because you can set up a solar panel next to essentially your own farm, and you're like, look, we've offset. But it's more funny just to watch to see the arguments people front throw at each other.
so I think those are the big boring headlines of today. India's ban on Chinese apps, including TikTok, has allowed homegrown short video apps like Josh and Thrive to flourish, now at a 10 billion valuation.
Lols.
Yes. Take note, if you are a very large country with a large population of internet users, you too could build a lot of unicorns very quickly by banning Chinese apps or American apps for that matter.
It doesn't take that much to
It's
replace
just
these
like
things.
it's just
Here's
like
my
a
thing
lemming
though:
walk.
is that a good long-term strategy?
Well, it's
Because
an excellent long-term strategy. It's this is the history of protectionist and trade markets goes way back. Short version is when you have a country like to 22nd version in America's history, we imported most of our industrial hardware and factory setups from Britain, like with let's say late 1700s, early 1800s. But then when we said, "Frack you, Britain, we're going to be our own country," all of a sudden they shut down the foreign markets, and local inventors had to invent their own ways of doing stuff. They had to build their own iron mills, they had to build their own steel mills, etc. And by the time we got to the railroad stage, it's like, okay, we've got American railroads. British financiers came in, and they said, hell, we'll fund that thing that's better than stuff we're building here in Britain. If you have a long-term history where you shut down your markets to external trade for 10, 20 years, you get an explosion of inventive people coming up with stuff that normally had to compete with foreign markets. The more you can do that for a short periods of protectionism are very beneficial for tech.
yeah,
This
but
is why it's
America.
better. Go
Except
ahead.
they're inflationary.
Hold on one
This
sec. Hold on, Ellie. I'll turn to you. But check out this next headline, how it relates. India's payment body approves WhatsApp's plans to extend payments services to 60 million additional users in India, allowing WhatsApp Pay to reach up to a total of 100 million users in India so that people can use WhatsApp to make payments, which is huge. It's incredibly, ridiculously, insanely huge. Why do we know that it's huge? Well, anyone who lives anywhere near China knows that in Asia, the WhatsApp of China or Asia is WeChat. WeChat enabled payments. It became the default way that people pay for everything. And I do mean everything, even goddamn foot massages. Or when the little fish eat on your feet, you're going to pay with WhatsApp Pay. Everything's you pay with WhatsApp Pay. It started out as a chat app, just like WhatsApp. And then they added payments, and then magic started happening.
WeChat.
Yes, WeChat. When WeChat added payments, what happened is other apps like Uber said, hey, you have payments built in. Could we add Uber functionality to WeChat? And then you handle the payment. And WeChat said, sounds good to us because we've got all the users. And now every app on the planet wanted to be inside of WeChat. And WeChat would handle the payment. It's almost like its own mini internet. It's like the Swiss Army knife of dozens of apps like Tinder, and everything else is built right into WeChat. But the key is you
Imagine the
have,
PayPal off mafia never broke up and they all just said, let's all throw in and get state
oh my God,
financing.
that would have been crazy. But the point is remember now. Here's where shit gets crazy. Do you remember when Facebook was being told by India, you must remove this content that we don't like? And Facebook originally said, no, we're not removing it. And India
By the
said,
way, can we
oh,
have a colony of Facebook Zero of your entire country because you guys don't appreciate how much imperialism has done for you? that Mark Andreessen kind of shot himself for an entire market there.
so now you know why Facebook was willing to do whatever dear leader Modi wanted, because they knew they needed to do exactly this.
Modi is modeled on Xi and Putin and the strongmen. The only question is, and he implemented identity in COVID, and now he's doing it via corporate surveillance, essentially. And those kings are not going to do anything but comply with these nation state rules because they have to, because they otherwise will get fired by their fiduciary shareholders that they owe this allegiance to. That's why they cannot resolve this. They will aid the destruction of the self-sovereign individual.
Ellie, I interrupted you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to amplify Chris's point that the more you learn to do for yourself or gain the capability to do for yourself, the better position that you're in contradistinction to the stated motivation for globalization that everybody can specialize in something, and therefore we will all be better off and more independent, and that will be wonderful because being overly interdependent actually kind of puts you at the mercy of a lot of people.
But of
So
course,
I
this
just
is
wanted
all
to
related to
really
the
quick before you
economic
say thing.
system.
It's a very narrow point. I was saying specifically for tech innovation, whether or not it's better or worse, there's a lot of pros and cons for trade versus not trade. But for tech innovation specifically, when protectionism tends to lead as long as you have a seed population of the technology. You can't just be completely cut off from that in the Stone Age thing. You have to have a seed population. It tends to result in rapid innovation. There are drawbacks. Well, one of the reasons why we have the global economy we do is because after World War II, they said it's people are too decentralized. It's too easy for any independent country to build up a military, build up a manufacturing base, and then declare war and then keep it going indefinitely because we have gotten so good at the technology that we're creating. So one of the reasons after World War II that they crippled the manufacturing and distributed as widely as possible, made it interlinked as possible, is to make it economic suicide for any country to declare war on each other. Now, that kind of happened. It's a little more nuanced discussion. It's a longer one. But the short version is that the current structure that we have was actually designed to be this way. And there are pros and cons to it. But we're seeing a lot of the order being rewritten right now. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah, that
And
model is going to break.
ultimately the economic model is supported by this export of jobs. It has enabled us to have this deflationary, veil uh, because of people's consumption habits. When you bring this back and when you have the protectionism, it will make things more expensive, and that is something that we're struggling with, and is going to create a lot of pain. And I think we're on the precipice of that pain.
You can have both sides.
Just a perspective, a historical perspective, to what Chris was talking about, tech innovation. About late 1800s, early
Hold on.
1900s.
I'm going to give you the 1 minute shot clock, Ben. Try and keep it under 1 minute.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So in
We,
turn,
we don't want the. We don't need. I understand historical perspectives can be a little lengthy, so let's get to the nitty gritty.
sure. In terms of intellectual protection, property protection, and piracy, actually, U.S. was the sort of the IP pirate, if you will,
Very
relative to
true.
European. Yeah, relative to European inventions and IP. So, and then 100 years later, U.S. became this powerhouse in IP ownership and innovation. So that's just what I want to say.
Okay. Well
China
done.
is following USA playbook historically with things like USA was a lot of what China has today as the manufacturing superpower. This is what USA was doing back in the day, like late 1800s or so. And one of the things I find very remarkable is Chinese party officials have a very strong understanding of American history, stronger than a lot of State Department officials in USA do actually. And so a lot of the playbooks around why they're doing works is because they study history and they know which things they can copy and paste into current day. And it's shocking how effective it is because even if they get something wrong, they're persistent enough in order to refine it until they get it right. What's bizarre is when we watch USA policymakers interfacing with China and they're going, where the hell are you getting the ideas that you can do this sort of thing? Because we're so ignorant of our own history, we don't recognize it. It's a bizarre set of situations. All right, thanks, Tyler.
The
I would
Dutch
add.
IP history. Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about here, right? The whole idea that America just stole all the IP from the Europeans and said, "Yeah, we're not going to worry about that," and now that just happens to be the case with China doing that to our intellectual property.
We had creative inspiration, but yeah, stealing is well, yeah, there is outright theft, sure, but it creates a good seed foundation for inspiring new things or whatever. It takes time to actually come up with new ideas. Having a good foundation to work with helps.
I
Speaking
would add
of,
that the
by the way,
Chinese understand economics better than most people in the West, simply because they believe in it technically, but not ideologically, or they understand it technically rather than believing in it ideologically.
They understand money's not real, and that's something very few people have remembered.
by the way, IP theft is not totally gone from the U.S. And to highlight that, WhatsApp has just announced communities, so you can now build communities inside of WhatsApp. Not an entirely new idea. but interesting functionality for an app with 2 billion people at the same time that they're getting ready to really go big with payments. So you'll have payments and community groups or groupings of people that can do audio calls of up to 32 people, file sharing of up to 2 gigabytes, reactions to each comment by each person, similar to like Twitter.
Discord and
Yeah,
Reddit, really.
yeah, exactly. Okay, there you go. So back to the tech headlines, and thank you to Jeff G for finding that one. I'm retweeting that one, like we're going to do with all the rest of these tweets here. I just want to make sure. The Verge says they have sources that Meta is set to release some AR glasses called Nazaire AR Glasses V1, version 1, not tied to any phone, and a cheaper pair, codenamed Hypernova, will come out in 2024, and Nazar version 2 are expected in 2026, and version 3 in 2028. Connecting those dots, it seems like it's every other year. I'm not so great with numbers, but it seems like they're going to go every other year with the product update on the Nazaire AR glasses coming out 2024.
Tyler, Nazar as in Nazar?
Nazare.
Nazare. I thought it was like Evil Eye Nazar.
Okay, so those are your big. Oh no, last one of the big boring ones is from CNBC. That in 2 weeks, Amazon will add a 5% fuel and inflation surcharge to U.S. sellers using its fulfillment services, which is below surcharges at UPS and FedEx. Okay.
90% of their sellers use this service for their for the thing. So it's about 90% of the third party sellers on Amazon are suddenly getting a 5% boost on their cost. Which, if they pass it on to consumers, that's like, well, congratulations, one of your largest markets just now got a 5%
Two
little
and a half
inflationary
percent,
boost.
yeah, two and a half
But
percent across
I
the
would say
economy.
for real
Crazy.
cost. I mean, I get stuff delivered to my house. I mean, I don't know how to I should have it grouped and delivered to Whole Foods, but every time it comes, it makes me cringe because it's like these micro deliveries that come on, not all together. They come. I mean, I can only imagine the tax that Amazon is subsidizing here. So I think it is time to like try and make the consumers feel this a little bit more, so that we don't get to just understand the impact.
Okay.
Yeah,
Next.
like ordering any electronics on Amazon, I'll get like 4 or 5 separate deliveries instead of one. So that seems kind of silly. I agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
My
that's
stuff.
because the storage management. Yeah, it happens here. If you buy a lot, they have a separate warehouse to do that. So that's more for them. That's more efficient to manage.
Okay.
All the stuff
Next.
you're getting on Amazon isn't necessarily from Amazon. Sometimes their warehouses are doing things on behalf of third party sellers, which is one of the reasons you get stuff at different, shipment points. And also they're trying to get it to you as fast as possible. They can hold everything there. Sometimes they'll give you an option. Do you want everything together? But they're not really incentivizing people to do that, because it's usually like, we'll give you like $1 in a digital credit if you get everything in one day. So people just say, why bother? It doesn't cost them. If you have Amazon Prime, it doesn't cost you anything additional to get stuff delivered as fast as possible, even if it comes on 4 separate days.
It
No, but that's right. It
incentivizes
is.
destruction of the economy, of the ecology.
No, it's coming from different sellers at different warehouses. I mean, a lot of stuff's not from Amazon. It's a lot from third-party sellers, as you said. It's coming from different. I mean, it's that whole last mile delivery, stocking, et cetera. Which is why they've got Amazon as well as other companies are building mini warehouses closer to the No, but consumer. Jennifer, the point I'm making, Yeah, sometimes, because my brother was involved with Amazon for yeah. many years doing this, so I know this. So they sometimes require that you move the goods to their warehouse. Okay, so you can't even directly ship it. It may even directly ship to the customer. So yeah, so it's not so it's that also. It's just moving it from some private concern. No, they're all private concerns, but from a third party to an Amazon warehouse, so Amazon could ship it out.
Okay. Next up, we've got about 7 more tweets to run through in the next 8 minutes. So 1 minute each. Here we go. From May, it says Latin American Bitcoin adoption gathers pace as Brazil makes its move. Brazil is the latest Latin American country to signal pro crypto sentiment as it pushes to establish a legal framework around digital assets. That would be huge if Brazil pulls that off, by the way. The next is from Thomas Tong via Wired that Feds have uncovered a Swiss Army knife for hacking industrial systems. The malware toolkit known as Pipedream is perhaps the most versatile tool ever made to target critical infrastructure like power grids and oil refineries. Well, that's great. The next is from Thomas Tong, that Putin, trying to sound impressive, says Russia will resume its lunar landing program. Yeah, right. You can't fly an airplane out of Russia, let alone. Uh,
I want to see those Russian broomsticks.
yeah. Oh,
Oh,
ouch,
maybe a trampoline that they can use.
ouch, 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 ouch.
You
The next,
laugh now.
yeah, exactly. Uh, COVID's theft of smell and taste may be due to inflammation. In 23 patients who died, researchers found olfactory nerve damage but little virus. So it's a whole lot of inflammation of the olfactory.
Infectious brain damage. The end of humanity. No.
It is the zombie apocalypse, a respiratory virus that contributes to cognitive decline.
The next is from PT
Yeah,
Yoder.
just before we leave that, just real quickly, um, autopsies of people who died acutely early in COVID have definitely identified the virus in the brain. The pathway is presumed to be through the sense of smell, through the cribriform plate into the brain, um, which maps to that British Biobank study showing progressive loss of gray matter in the olfactory pathways in the brain. So this speculative paper is already superseded by better evidence.
There's also one documented autopsy of a kid who died of something else, so it wasn't an acute death, and the infection was also asymptomatic, and they also found that the virus had replicated in the brain.
There's many different sources that converge on the virus getting in the brains. Wear a mask, save your brain.
Okay, next up is from NBC News, that a video game called Fantastic Beasts
Oh, that would
3.
have been a much cooler game. Fantastic beats and where to find them. It could be like a music hunting app, and then like soul underground magical music thing. That would be awesome. Like DDR meets Dance Revolution meets Pokemon. That would be a game I play. We're gonna get a boring Harry Potter thing here though.
So the headline is that this game has some dialogue that talks about homosexuality to some degree. And so that dialogue has been removed from the Chinese version of the game. Dialogue that was edited out alluded to the romantic past between male characters, but not in China because they got a declining birth rate, and that ain't going to help. So get that out of there. So the next one is from. By the way, don't if you are new to tech news, there's a long history to the comment, the joke that I just made. So go back and watch all the old episodes if you want to understand that joke.
I'm glad you said
One
that.
year of your life.
So the next is from Bloomberg, that Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, said on Wednesday, that was yesterday, that the U.S. is warning governments around the world who are sitting on the fence over the international effort to punish Russia, that if you don't punish Russia, you're likely to be on our bad side. Now,
Uh-oh.
does that not fit very nicely with what some handsome bald white dude has been saying in this room, that the US is actually very interested in how Russia is being punished for all of this? Like, intensely interested. In fact, we are leading all of the sanctions and pushing the other countries to join in the sanctions viciously. We are obsessed with the negative consequences for Russia for what they're doing.
Just trying to discover who the bald guy is.
Yeah,
Right.
there's like five handsome balding people on this stage. It's pretty amazing.
But the
So,
pushback
Who is that,
is
Demiller?
the
I don't know.
pushback is
I
I
can't
want
stop
to
laughing.
stand,
I'm
but I
so
want to
sorry.
stand. But
the pushback is that Russia is probably quite more successfully than expected trying to create a BRIC-centered financial
right,
system and
right,
drag Africa into it.
right. Right. Which is yeah. So Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Wednesday will warn governments. Why is America warning other governments that sitting on the fence over the international effort to punish Russia over its invasion um, is a red line for the U.S.?
Yeah, but the
You're either
challenge
with
for the
us or you're
U.S.
against us.
The challenge for the U.S. exactly the challenge for the U.S. on some of this bullying is some of the countries that we are starting to push back on. We don't do much trading with them. We don't. They don't export. They virtually export nothing to us, and all we do is export grain to them. So we would be hurting our own farmers by shutting them down. So, as some of these countries become more independent and stand up, we're going to see things that we haven't seen in the last 50 years.
But
This
by
is
the way,
when people start learning special terms like special drawing rights and bancors and really weird old terms that haven't been talked about in a while, because that's the bedrock for the international finance that undergirds a lot of these trade things. The ability for America to shape the international world financial system after World War II, we sidelined Britain and basically inherited their empire. We've admittedly been a lot more soft about it. We let people have like some independence, but at the same time, the underlying foundations are very, very American in nature. And when you see that being threatened with new sorts of systems and such, emergences of alternative payments and things, you have things with China's trying to say, hey, you can trade in this. Russia's saying you can trade in rubles, and you start saying, oh well, you can do Bitcoin. Whatever these things are, they represent a threat to the old way of doing things. Now, that doesn't mean that America won't have a stake in the new order that comes after, but there is a lot of old state power that would prefer not to go to other systems. So you're going to see that flex much harder here, because if they flex and it doesn't accomplish an objective, then that removes a lot of the actual implicit power or the threat of that power. If you try to say, hey, we did a heavy flex on this and didn't quite go as far as we thought it would, that's a sign for other countries that there's weakness or there's opportunity. So you're going to see an incentive to go the opposite direction of saying, we flexed just a little bit, look how much damage that caused. Don't mess with essentially the underlying system. So that's there's a lot of politics around this stuff and watching how it unfolds.
And it's not just like about the actual, started to happen overnight just now. I think it's been going on for a while, like for past month or so at least. So if three of the countries you would see, like Pakistan, regime change already done. Sri Lanka is kind of like in turmoil. It's already been done. And Kuwait is sort of like going through that. So there is a bit of like whoever actually sat on the fence would ultimately have to actually make up a mind. And, there is already plan in action, I believe.
Kind of ironic to be the coming from the one touting to be the leader of freedom. It's like, no, you're not allowed to be on the fence. You have to pick one. I don't know. It's ironic.
Well,
This
freedom
is
for people is
America.
different from freedom for states.
Well, that was the major famous statement from the Bush that either you're with us or you're against us, just right after 9/11. So it's that kind of a situation, pretty much.
I would just like to highlight that how inept the U.S. was at managing COVID, and yet has been so effective, supremely effective and efficient in record level sanctions and record level time. We have never been so efficient as we are with punishing Russia.
Changing administrations does a
There's
lot.
if there's anything America knows how to do is destroy governments and countries.
Tyler,
That's
those are not comparable things. You're dealing with a virus that it's a new virus. Nobody knows how it's going to act. To
Okay,
compare,
then let me throw it at you. Name
competent
anything
government
America
officials.
has ever fucking done to this degree of efficiency.
the interstate
Ice
highway
race,
system.
moon race.
Well, okay,
We
great.
have
But
hardly
notice you
had
picked
any
Moon
something
race
race.
was
from fucking 60
exactly.
years ago.
Yeah, but it was again with the Russians. So my question is, what if the virus had more Russian origins? Maybe we would have been more effective with it. So I think there's something very pivotal about the theme of Russia and how we're always against them because they're against freedom, because they're communists, and those times have definitely changed, but the pattern still seems to remain.
I just
No
No,
want to
way.
come
highlight
on. This
We're
is
against
how
China as well. It's
keenly
also
upset that
it's
the
just
U.S.
because
is on
we
this issue.
dismantled our we dismantled the ability to respond to epidemics and pandemics versus we're not used to that. That's not something that we normally deal with, and we dismantled that versus stuff that we are used to dealing with, which is Tyler noted. We're this type of warfare we're very adept at.
We
Come
have
on, this is all
extremely
about
competent government
what
people. I'm going to take a bit of flack for this saying this. We have extraordinarily effective people at dealing with pandemics, biowarfare, and all manner of different infections. The thing is that they got sidelined at the very beginning of the pandemic, and then were muzzled for the first month or two, where you can do the most effective responses. One of the
That's
things that's
exactly
really
right. You
one
nailed it, Chris.
we
That's
have the
exactly
ability
right.
to do
Absolutely.
this. They were intentionally crushed. And by the time it became a nation state's emergency, at that point, the existing infrastructure didn't exist. That said, there were plans and on the table of how do you scale up to deal with that. Those plans were shuffled. Then it became a what's the worst way you can possibly handle this? National Defense Authorization Act, the thing that allows the military to get their budget every year. There's a related version of this with the War Production Board that allows us to centralize policy. That got shelved. The groups that were doing the policy response were literally personally figuring out how they can make more money for different mass dealings. You have groups doing it to different red versus blue states based around political voting, just so they can get at certain political patronage favors. Everything that could go wrong did. But I want to say that that wasn't because that we had to do that. We had those internal capabilities. The same thing for Russia, etc. The real thing that's the reason why you're seeing it being effective is because you're seeing both parties working together on this. You see deep state groups that have been around for forever that are full of criminologists from way back in the day, to the modern groups that see a threat to their current technological basis, to the energy companies that like to have something in the Black Sea, to overseas allies. It's more just the fact that people are getting along and they say they're not actively sabotaging each other. That's the only reason why it's more effective now. We have had these capabilities all along. It's just the fact we're not
And
using them.
and whatever you think of Tom Friedman and his writing, he was writing about the very issue of polarization, handcuffing us for any and all important decisions because of political polarization about a decade ago.
Okay.
We have these
Chris, this
capabilities. It's just whether or not we actually use them and we can get
is a
along with
total
it. And when we
political
cite
failure.
Russia specifically as causing that internal discord or influencing from overseas, they don't have to like cause it. There's plenty of things historically we have things to fight about. But whether or not it gets amplified, whether or not it gets massively boosted, that's a new element that we haven't had internal mechanisms to deal with until relatively recently. So that's the part where you're seeing almost like a vengeance thing kicking in here. And
Okay.
that's where it's going to be interesting to see how much the deep state groups are going to go with it, because this is something that you work for your entire career to do something with, and then you find out, oh crap, we're not allowed to do anything, and then you get administration says go nuts. I mean, I don't think we've even begun to see the beginnings of this sort of thing. Ukraine can go much much farther. It'll be crazy to see how it turns out.
So check out the related article I just pinned to the top of the room. Reuters says they have an exclusive that China's biggest oil company prepares Western retreat over sanctions fears. China's top offshore oil and gas producer is preparing to exit its operations in Britain, Canada, and the United States because of concerns in Beijing that assets could become subject to Western sanctions. So, why is China worried about being sanctioned?
Well, Tyler, that's being talked about in other parts of the world as well. When when we put sanctions on in Britain, uh,
Right?
I've heard a number of people say we thought Britain was a safe haven for our assets, and now we don't think
So, Professor,
that's a bit of a concern,
what
right?
is China likely to do that would cause the U.S. to nationalize their oil company?
Just
On
trading with the
paper,
So
it's help
Russians.
Tyler,
That's
aggressive.
all.
okay,
That's we know
so
that.
just basically we were talking about this Malacca the other day. You actually brought it up that Malaysian, kind of like you stopped that for the Russian one. I was thinking like if you replace Russia with China, imagine if that would have been scenario where the Chinese ship actually going through the Strait of Malacca, whether Malaysians would be able to actually stop that or not. So that's the biggest question mark. When China jumps into this whole equation, there's no going to be any possibility of actually, making sure that all those restrictions is going to be in place. Not everybody is going to be actually up to the level where they can actually by themselves say, "Oh, America says that you have these restrictions. We're going to apply that." And all of a sudden it's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. Russia, on the other hand, doesn't have the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean and all those kind of things presence in there.
But when China comes in into this equation, there's going to be a lot harder to actually put those restrictions in place. That's one thing. Secondly, what Chris was talking about, this time around, it's not the same thing. It's not just about the COVID. It's not about the. It's basically the actually the hegemony we are talking about here is going to fundamentally question the whole concept. The ruble and yuan is already being traded in the actual energy deals. India, there was a 2+2 meeting like yesterday or day before. The US came in heavy-handed on the India, but they cannot actually deal in the same scenario as to deal with other countries vis-a-vis with India because they are part of the Quad. They actually have got the deal going on with Russia, who is taking like a $35 a barrel, and they are paying in ruble. So imagine if there are countries who have got some sort of like a significant placement in the world, they start to trade in ruble and yuan. You are effectively talking about that there's no petrodollar there anymore, and there's no control over the financial markets anymore. So this is what the picture is emerging. So if US doesn't take and put those people who are actually sitting on the fence, they effectively lose everything from the financial system. That's the background.
Yes.
That's
Note
the
though,
whole game.
we read the article, I think 2 days ago, 48 hours ago, that Apple, the world's largest company, is now making iPhones in India. That's called de-risking because if you don't think Apple knows what the fuck's coming down the road, you're an idiot. They know this shit. They see what's going on way ahead of time, and they're already trying to get out there.
The
Are they?
entire
Are they?
thing.
Yeah, everything's going into Vietnam and India, and not
Yeah,
slowly.
and Tyler,
So, and
our
China's
Prime
biggest energy
Minister's
company is
trade envoy was
China.
in Vietnam right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
China.
uh,
China's biggest energy company is getting out of quote unquote the West. So this is not gonna. This is going to continue, not slowly. And China's not stupid. China also has an incredible track record for having a sense for where the ball's going and being an early mover on shit like this. As usual, I applaud them for their ability to do these kinds of things.
And,
Tyler, just wanted
and
to let you know that an hour ago, Prince Walid announced that they rejected the deal um, Elon Musk made on Twitter because he's a
Told
major shareholder.
already told
Oh
you,
wow.
as predicted.
Of
So
course.
Well,
the next,
Tyler, if you
Did you
tie,
guys go into a deep dive on that? Because I would be
We
upset if
did.
you did.
yeah,
Oh man, I missed it.
yeah, we did, but now that we've been discussing this other stuff, you could tie the whole thing back to Elon Musk because Tyler, if you think the U.S. government's going to put pressure on other governments about not straddling the fence,
right?
what pressure are they going to try to put on Elon Musk, who wants to go straddle the fences like he's like a world player and he's going
Right.
to do whatever deals he wants with China on his other stuff? I mean, it's easier to put pressure on him than to put pressure on India. So we're gonna, we'll see how consistent they are.
This
Elon's
is when we
also
find out
from
who
South
actually runs
Africa,
things.
right? So it's like he's not necessarily an American. He's just an industrialist in that
But he's got
sense.
American companies, and
Of
he's
course, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm just
He's very,
saying, like, he
he's
doesn't necessarily have those ties, like that patriotic type stuff that
he does.
Google
You,
and
No, he's
Facebook.
flag waving.
you,
Do you see him with
you'd be
Ukraine? He
surprised.
was like denying
Well,
Starlink and
that
everything.
can
He's
be
red, white, and blue.
signal.
You
That
can
can
say it
be
happened.
what's it called again? Virtual signaling to the
I
Well,
don't
no,
know.
people who
no,
really
no.
like that type of stuff. Like,
Musk
I
will
wouldn't
symbol
put it
as
past him.
much
He's a mastermind.
patriotism. Musk will symbol as much patriotism as he can possibly muster right now, because right now there is so much geopolitics being realigned, and he very much wants to be seen as I am the most involved American there ever possibly could ever be. And that's the thing, because whenever you have countries go into conflict, that's the thing that gets questioned about how loyal are you actually. The last things about where's Tesla's factories overseas, where you're making, how did you make your Model 3 production, how did you make your actual numbers? Well, you made a deal with the Chinese government to help you get your ass
Exactly.
out.
No,
That
yeah,
sort of thing
I
becomes
agree
more
with you on
questioned.
that aspect, but like we know Elon to be very like duplicitous in a certain way,
He's
where it's like he
opportunistic.
said stuff but he doesn't really mean it, and he keeps like that type of aspect of Elon's personality. So it can be very real. Like I wouldn't say it's far fetched to say that he knows what he's doing like he can see the whole chessboard end. He does
He
whatever
has
he wants,
very good
basically.
advisors, and sometimes he listens to them.
Listen,
Some.
I like that sometimes.
I want to get to the next article, which is somewhat related. BB found one from the South China Morning Post that Chinese internet portal Sohu seeks delisting from the Nasdaq after being named by U.S. regulators as non-compliant with audit rules. And the Nasdaq and NYSE have already had a couple of issues with this, and they've warned Chinese companies that you either go by Western auditing, because there's been a couple of massive kind of fraud examples, like the Luckin Coffee example, where they were just completely bullshitting all of their numbers as a publicly traded company. That doesn't work for publicly traded companies. You kind of have to have transparent auditing. They were just fudging the numbers completely. And so, due to kind of having a bad track record of fudging numbers on publicly traded companies, the U.S. exchanges are telling the Chinese companies, "You comply with our auditing processes, or you're going to have to delist." And so now it looks like Sohu is going to have to delist. It says in the South China Post article, a total of 23 companies, including Baidu, which is kind of like the Google of China, the search engine, and Weibo, which is the Twitter of China, have been identified by the SEC as some of the 23 companies at being at risk of delisting for non-compliance with auditing rules because they do creative number crunching.
Sounds like soft sanctions to me.
Hey,
That's
Tyler, on that
I
article,
feel like
precisely
we
which
do
was
right.
this a lot.
Tyler,
Nicholas,
on that article that was just pinned
I
at the
just,
top.
I just, hold on. I just got to fucking break out the fucking clap meter for Nicholas on that one, because that is again for exacerbating the decoupling that's underway. It's a variation of that, because the U.S. can be like, put a little more pressure on those Chinese listed companies. By the way, uh, yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was going to say that the article that was pinned about what Jim Cramer said about the Twitter board has no choice, and if you read the article, he claims that the board members could have personal liability for violating the fiduciary duties if they accept the deal. He has no clue what he's talking about. Okay, I've
He's
been on.
Kramer.
No. I've been on a public company board. I've been through stuff with lawyers about this whole issue. I mean, just in general, and I can tell you, there is like you've got tremendously broad discretion to determine what's in the company's best interest. So whether this deal gets accepted, it doesn't get accepted. I mean, the fact of the matter is, he's offering a price, and I'm not suggesting they should take it. What I am saying, he is offering a price, and in part, you could claim he manipulated the market. Fine, whatever. Okay, he's offering a price if you believe it's viable, but he could actually fund it, which is another issue. Okay, but if he could actually fund it, that's significantly above where the stock was trading before he got involved. So I see no realistic chance that any board member would have any kind of personal liability for violating any fiduciary responsibility if they accepted the offer. Plus, they have D&O insurance. So this whole his whole Kramer's whole argument is ridiculous. Now they may decide to reject it. Maybe they should reject it. But this idea of it that they would be in some sort of you know personal liability danger for violating a fiduciary responsibility for accepting this offer that's way above where the stock was trading just a couple of weeks ago, to me is absolutely
The stock
ridiculous.
was at 70 previously, so it's been above the price he's offered.
Yeah, but you don't have to necessarily hit the all-time high, Nicholas. I mean, and that's not to say, the board has tremendous. Go look at the Time Warner. And you're probably familiar with it. The Time Warner Paramount case that was decided 30 years ago in the Delaware courts. Okay, the board has tremendous discretion to decide what's in the best interest of shareholders.
If
Okay,
this goes through, I propose that we call it the day the internet died. The eternal September that starts off the waves of people coming into the internet from the AOL days. I would say this would book into the other, the thing that was going to be the ultimate decentralized platform that anyone can use. Musk takes it over and it shows, well, a single individual can purchase the entire town public square. It's kind of a nice little bookend for the let's decentralize everything. Here's what happens at the end of it. So it's
I'm
like,
not
okay,
talking
well, that
about
was
the
fun.
merits, the demerits. I'm just talking about that narrow issue that Kramer raised, that somehow board members would
Yeah,
be at
Kramer's an
some sort
idiot.
of liability for this if they accepted it. That's ridiculous.
Sounds like a bluff.
Okay, last but not least, Heyman from Toronto sends in this one that the aviation industry is pinning their hopes of returning post COVID on digital identities, super apps, and biometrics to turn around revenues. Digital identity could significantly upgrade the way airlines operate with a truly global approach rather than a patchwork of systems. Is the article in the chat?
Total surveillance will save you. Of course, that makes sense. Yes, let's invite total surveillance, and we can get through the airport even quicker. We won't even have to take our shoes off. You know, it'd be amazing.
I think it's highly not possible because the different countries cannot even agree on a common vaccine passport.
Exactly.
I
Alrighty,
appreciated the irony.
there we go. We did it again. We'll do it again
Thank
tomorrow on Friday. Thank
you.
you, everybody, and we'll have a wonderful rest of the week.
May I announce the room?
Oh yes,
Yes,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, Philip. Yeah.
Critical Biomass Project is about scaling biomass to create biofuels and provide food and fertilizer, biofertilizer in the wake of the Ukraine crisis. It's a tragedy, but also an opportunity. 5 p.m. Pacific time Saturday. And look at my profile. There's a link to it.
Yeah,
And
I'll pin
please
on
join
top
the
already.
Critical Biomass Club.
Already
And
pin on
it's
top of the
pinned
room.
at the top of the